2023 meeting of the Planning Board. First, we'll take a roll call to introduce board members and staff. Kate Wynn.
Here.
Phil Giordano.
I'm here.
Josh Ames.
Here.
Chris Paff.
Here.
And I'm Ellen Rawlings, and I'm here. We also have Elijah Romulus, our town planner, Nora Loughnane, the Director of Community and Economic Development, Jessica Cole, our recording secretary, Alex Portillo from Westwood Media Center, and joining shortly, I'm sure, Amanda Wolf, who is our housing and land use planner. This meeting is recorded by Westwood Media Center and broadcast live on local cable television Comcast Channel 6 and Verizon Channel 42. Meetings are also live on the Westwood Media Center's YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining the meeting via Zoom, you can find the login directions in the planning board meeting notice that's posted to the calendar section of the town's webpage at https://www.townhall.westwood.ma.us/. We will begin the meeting with only the board members and staff unmuted and on video. As the chair recognizes individuals to speak, we will unmute them. Board members may choose to mute themselves when they are not speaking in order to minimize background noise. For applications, the chair will first invite the applicant to address the board and give a presentation summarizing what is being requested. Board members receive the application materials prior to the meeting and will have reviewed them. Board members may ask questions during and following the presentation. Staff and outside experts will provide comments to the board. If the issue includes a public hearing, the board will then proceed to the public comment portion of the public hearing and will restate the instructions. In this remote meeting format, residents and guests may participate in several ways. Attendees should raise their hand and wait to be unmuted and recognized to speak over the Zoom meeting application or from a telephone dial-up. We will be able to hear you but not see you. Additionally, comments may be submitted by email or regular mail prior to the meeting. When we come to that part of the meeting, I will remind everyone of the process. Following the public comment portion, the board will deliberate and make a decision or continue the hearing to a specific future date. All remote meetings require that votes be taken by roll call. When a motion and a second has been made, the chair will ask if there is any further discussion before proceeding to a roll call vote and will then restate the results of the vote. Okay, Elijah, do we have any changes to our agenda this evening?
No changes to the agenda.
All right, then our first agenda item is 384 Washington Street, and this is a public hearing, so I will read a portion of the public hearing notice. The Westwood Planning Board will hold a remote public hearing on December 19th, 2023 at 7 p.m. via Zoom regarding an application filed by James Lambrianitis. I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly, on behalf of Lambrian Construction Corporation for consideration of a consolidated environmental impact and design review pursuant to section 7.3 and special permit for a reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces pursuant to section 6.1.9 of the Westwood zoning bylaw for the purposes of a change of use to a monument business and wealth management company and using 7 parking spaces for both businesses at 384 Washington Street, Westwood, Mass. 02090 in accordance with PB-23-47. The property is in the local business B, LBB zoning district and within the flexible multiple use overlay district 6, FMUOD 6. Land affected, assessors map 23, lot 220, property owner, Lambrian Construction Corporation. Okay, do we have folks from the applicant here that would like to give us a presentation?
Yes.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is William O'Connell. I'm the attorney for Mr. Frangiosa, who is the tenant at the subject property. I'm an attorney. My office is at 1333 Main Street in Walpole, and we appreciate, Madam Chairperson, we appreciate the board's time this evening. We're here this evening to respectfully request relief, again, for the subject property, 384 Washington Street, under section 6.19 for a reduction in the minimum number of parking spaces for the site from 12, I believe 12 is required, and we're respectfully requesting 7 spaces. We're also requesting the approval under the EIDR review and some specific waivers. I want to thank the board again. I particularly want to thank the planners, Romulus Wolf and Director Lofnane, who have been kind enough to work with me and Mr. Frangiosi in assisting us for this evening. We also have available, I have my client available here. He's in the conference room. He's here to take questions, as well as the other tenant and the owner of the other tenant is Ariel D'Angelola, and she is a financial advisor from Nightingale Wealth Solutions. Hopefully she's called in and she's available. And again, we also have the owner of the premises of the property, James Lambrianis, available for the board's consideration. So very briefly, I could give the board some background on the site and some procedural history. I believe Member Pfaff was on the board 3 years ago when a special permit was granted for this site. But I can just, again, give you specifics. With respect to the site, it's I believe we are in an LBB zone. The building, it's a one-story building with the building footprint is 2,612 square feet. The lot area size is 7183. And the proposed uses on the first floor for Mr. Frangiosa is for Granite Monument sales, which I believe is allowed as a matter of right under the retail sales use in the zoning bylaw. And then Miss D'Angelo's is up on the second floor, and she is a wealth management use. So she is coming in, I believe she is coming in for a use which is going to include, bear with me for 1 second here, professional services establishment. So my understanding is that the building inspector calculated the required number of spaces at 12. We have submitted a plan for the board's consideration this evening for 7 spaces. And, what I'd like to try to stress to the board this evening is that the site and the required parking, minimum parking for 7 on-site spaces will work and is adequate under the bylaw. We understand the limitations with the site. It's obviously a small site. It's been there since 1964. So we would respectfully submit that these 2 businesses will work. We have submitted just a detailed narrative with respect to the type of business, the employees, the customers. And what I'd like to stress most importantly is that both of these businesses are going to have customers by appointment only. My understanding is that Miss D'Angelo's site, she has 3 employees, but they're not there all the time. It's a lot of their work is virtual. Mr. Frangiosa has 1 employee. All his fabrication is going to be done off-site. It's done in Vermont. So there's not going to be any fabrication at the site. And if you're looking at the plan, I don't know if you're able to pull up the plan, but you'll see that from Washington Street, there's 2 proposed spaces for customers in front, 2 standard spaces, which are 9 by 18. And then there's proposed employee parking. If you're looking at it from Washington Street, on the right-hand side, closest to Dunkin' Donuts. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm just going to give the board a second. Thank you so much for pulling that up. I appreciate it. So again, if you're looking at the site from Washington Street, on the southerly side, there's 2 proposed spaces for employees. There's 1 in the back, and then on the right-hand side, closest to the Roach Brothers site, you'll see 2 more spaces. So again, what's important here is that the both businesses are by appointment only. I know the board may have concerns, and there's some proposed conditions which my client would be happy to speak to, including that there'll be obviously no more 7 vehicles on the site at any time. With respect to snow events, minor snow events, my client will clear the snow with storage in the rear corners. And if there's a major storm, the applicant will remove the snow from the site for major snow events. I believe the board was potentially looking for no outside storage or display of merchandise. There was a concern about that. And what I can tell you is that my client, again, has been trying to work with the town. He's actually had some awnings approved by the building inspector Doyle, I believe, last year. He has purchased an entrance and exit sign, I believe, from the Westwood DPW, because if there may be a concern just with the parking spaces in front. You're coming in from Washington Street, just making sure there's access there. So that's a very, very quick background, and I'm sure the board has questions. Again, my client is here, as is Ariel and the owner. But I would, again, respectfully submit that it's we understand it's a tight site. It's not a great layout, but we would submit that the uses here, are probably the best potential uses, given there's just not a lot of activity, and that few uses would work. We would submit that that these particular uses, where it's by appointment only, sales businesses, he would potentially meet with folks who are ordering monuments in the evening, and again, the financial services firm is taking appointments only by a lot of virtual appointments. So we would welcome the board's comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We did not have a peer review for this, so I will open this up to board member comments and questions if any of my colleagues would like to ask or comment. Chris.
Thank you. First of all, I can't believe I was the only one on the board 2.5 years ago that's still on it. But Nora, can you just, I'm asking because you were the only one also in the room at the time, I think. Can you confirm that picture that we just saw was dated October 4th of this year? Is that the same parking configuration that was approved in 21?
No, it's slightly revised. So I think the plan approved in 2021 had 2 parking spaces behind the building, 2 on one side, 1 on the other, and 2 in front. So it's the same number of spaces, but I think one of the spaces from the rear has now been moved to the side.
Okay, the 2 that I was thinking specifically were the 2 in the front. It looks like they're parallel parked right in front, and in that picture, the door actually appears to be entering into one of the spots.
So they're in the same location as the plan that was approved, with the exception of the plan that you approved originally had one of those spaces to be an accessible space. And there was a landing area next to it that was to be striped off. And the building commissioner rejected that plan, saying it was not in conformance with the Architectural Review Board's accessibility standards. So the building commissioner at that time was allowing the applicant to move forward with the 2 spaces in front shown as they are shown on this current plan.
Okay.
If I may, there is also a sidewalk that off the front of the building that's raised up, so it gives you the extra space to open the door and everything.
And Nora, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I remember we had a entrance only or no exit only signs so that people coming down Washington don't take a quick an early left. They know better than to do that.
Yes, one of the driveways, there were 2 driveways, and the southern driveway was for the entrance and the northern driveway was for the exit.
Right, but I remember discussing signage.
I believe they had to have an enter and exit sign as well as arrows on the pavement.
Okay.
The main difference is that there was one business, the monument business, operating with those 7 spaces. And the board at that time issued a special permit to allow 7 spaces instead of the greater number that were required by zoning. So now what you have today is two businesses also looking to operate in the space with the same 7 spaces.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone else have a question or a comment they would like to share? Kate?
Yes, please. If I recall, I appreciate that I wasn't on the board, but if I recall, the last time this was discussed, there was also a consideration of having some monuments outside as well, which seemed like it would be taking up some of the walking space that's available to get around the vehicles. Is there any consideration of having monuments outside?
My understanding is that this when there's 10 feet, you see on the plan, there's actually 10 feet in front of those spaces from the spaces to Washington Street. So as far as the monuments and placement of the monuments, Al?
I guess I was told no.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that hadn't changed.
And the 10 feet that was just mentioned, that's drive space. The 10 feet in front of
Right.
the 2 parking spaces. That's the drive aisle to get in and out.
Right.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Any other board members have questions? Phil?
The handicap spot in the front, it's a little difficult to see on the plan. Is that the one that is in front of the door, or
It was
can you just give me a sense as to where the handicap spot is and how that's accessible?
Yeah, so my understanding from just looking at the last viewing the last meeting was that the handicap space was not required because it was less than 15 spaces. So my understanding was that that was not part of that was not a condition.
And that was another thing, difference between what the planning board approved and what the building commissioner approved. So the planning board did approve the special permit with the requirement of a handicap space. The building commissioner looked at it, said the space could not be constructed as proposed, and the ABA does not require a handicap space for this number of parking spaces. So the building commissioner at the time, Commissioner Doyle, would have allowed the applicant to go forward without a handicap space.
It's not
Okay.
And we would submit, Mr. Giordano, that it is wide enough.
It is wide enough if it was necessary.
Right.
Okay. What's I know it's mostly virtual, but what's the level of appointments for the wealth management? Perhaps she can enlighten us. Is it daytime, nighttime? Tell us a little bit about your business.
Hi, yeah. So typically, I mean, I've got clients everywhere from here to California. So as it stated, like a lot of our appointments are virtual. I mean, even tonight I had a client, they're in Dedham. They still want to meet virtually just because husband and wife are in different places and it's easier. So I would say, we're seeing like maybe 2 to 3 people in the office a week. And we do annual reviews from January to March, risk management meetings from April to June, and then year-end tax and investment meetings from September to November. So December, July, and August, we aren't really having any meetings there unless they're, circumstantially critical to a client. And even local people, it's just, running around, kids traveling, this and that. It's easier for them a lot of times to meet virtually as well. But I'd say usually 2 to 3 per advisor, and they're anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes.
Your staff, how often are they in person versus virtual?
So I would say that, so it's myself and one other advisor, and we're both in and out throughout the day because we're meeting people in different places, this and that. But I would say we're probably there. You probably have usually at most 2 people there at the same time. And even then it's probably, 4 to 6 hours because they're coming back, printing something off, scanning something, running out, back out, or hosting some meetings there.
Have you had any circumstance where there was a problem with parking or that there was a limitation on parking for anyone with respect to either you or the monument?
No.
Okay. That's all I have, Ellen.
Thank you, Phil. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, just looking at the plans, I understand that it's largely remote. It is just sort of a mess looking at that parking, and I understand it's constricted by the lot layout and everything else, and we want to see this improve and be used for a thoughtful, useful manner to the town and the applicant, obviously, but it does strike me that there are a lot of issues. The other sort of question I have for the board and Nora and everyone else is, there have been obviously some other changes with the bylaws since the applicant applied. Does any of that impact this as they're seeking a new special permit associated with this, particularly to sustainability?
I'm not aware of any provisions of the sustainability article that would come into play here. They are not proposing any extra alterations. They're only proposing the use of an existing building.
And just real quick on the parking statement, Josh, that you said, typically I always park on the side near Roach Brothers, and then Dimitri usually parks on the side near Dunkin' Donuts, and then clients just pull up front. So we haven't, I know it looks Hot Mess Express on a piece of paper, but if you're there in person, there are 2 cars just tucked on the side. You really don't even notice it. And it's a nice, like, clean way for our clients to just pull up front.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Did any of my colleagues have any further questions or comments based on that discussion? I have a couple. I noticed in the project narrative, there was a reference to occasional walk-ins, and I'm just trying to get a sense of, from either or both businesses, how frequently that happens. I can't imagine that for either business there'd be a ton of walk-ins, but there is a difference between occasional walk-ins and appointment only. One is pretty arbitrary, one is not. So I'd just like to get a sense of what that volume could look like at worst.
The only time in my experience I've ever had a walk-in is usually it's just a client come in and drop off paperwork or to sign something, and then they leave. And it's like, we usually have even with that, we usually have a heads up, like, oh, I'm going to be coming by Thursday. I'm going to drop off my tax return or whatever. They're not staying for an appointment or a meeting or looking for a, consultation. They're just picking up or dropping off or signing papers.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Connell, I don't know
yeah, Sal's right here, but I think, Sal, I don't want to speak for you, but I think
It's a showroom.
it's a showroom, and you're going to get called. Unfortunately, he's going to get calls from families who have lost a loved one, and
And there's no signage up yet, so they don't know.
yeah,
We just,
and he doesn't have any signage yet at this point. So I don't think he's
we haven't had walk-ins.
haven't had any walk-ins.
I wouldn't expect many. It's kind of a specialty item that from experience, you don't really go looking for it until you need one. So I just kind of wanted to get a sense of that. That actually kind of leads into another question. I'm a little unclear. Maybe it's because there's no signage, but so is the Monument Shop currently open as well as the Wealth Management Company?
No, not at this time, no. I'm still, just put a carpet down inside. Just trying to get it together.
Okay. And I'm just curious because I was not on the board 2 years ago, but I did watch that meeting. I was aware of the proceedings. I'm just curious what caused the delay in, from the time you got your permit to now.
And I had the same question, Chairperson Rollins. So Sal had indicated that he's actually been trying to get the site ready. He has been working with the building inspector. Sal, what did you do inside? You pointed it. You said you had to.
We did some interior painting. We did a lot of work on the outside, and just some carpeting. Just trying to get it together.
Can you hear him, Chairperson Rollins?
I can. Yes,
Great,
actually,
great.
quite clearly. That's great. Okay. I did want to my colleague Kate's question about not displaying stones outside. I remember that conversation from a couple years ago. And I'm glad that that condition is standing with respect. I know that was a big concern about the neighbors, so I fully support continuing to uphold that condition that the stones stay inside. And I did see that in the list of conditions, so I do support that. The only other question I had, and this kind of parlays into where I would turn this over to town staff for their comments. I noticed in the comments from our new building commissioner, there was a note that the parking configuration does not allow access for an emergency vehicle. And that to me is concerning. So I'd like to have a little bit of a conversation about that. So I guess that's really a question for Nora and Elijah.
And Chairperson Rollins, just very quickly, I read through the fire, I think the fire department or public safety had commented that they didn't see an issue, and that was Chris Sheehy. So for whatever
Okay,
that's.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I also are, Mike Perkins is a experienced and highly competent. So if he has a concern, with respect, I feel like it's our responsibility to at least discuss it. So,
Understood.
thank you.
Madam Chair, I did have a conversation with Mr. Perkins this afternoon. He did express that the site did give him some pause as it relates to emergency services, but he did kind of fall back on the fact that police and fire had okayed it, and that while he does have concern, he, for emergency services, he deferred to that.
Okay, that is helpful. I feel better hearing that, because that did, out of everything else on that page, that jumped out at me as okay, we need to at least take a minute to look at that. So that was all that I had for questions. At this point, I would ask if any town staff had any comments or questions they would like to add. I'm not hearing anything.
I guess I would just say that I did prepare a set of conditions if the board were so inclined to approve this project. It reflects some of the special permit conditions that were previously instated, as well as a review at a year's time to actually take a look at the parking and see if it actually maintains its correct usefulness with the two new businesses.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Excuse me. I think that's reasonable, given that right now there's only one business operating, so we don't really have a sense of what it's going to look like. I would support that condition. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I would support that condition. I think it's fair.
I think it makes sense.
If there are no further questions or comments from board members and staff, this is a public hearing, so I would open it up to public comment at this time. If anyone here would like to ask a question or make a comment, please either raise your hand and we will promote you to panelist. Please remember that you need to state your full name and address for the record, or you're welcome to use the Q&A feature, but also please include your full name and address. Give that a second. I'm not seeing any public comments, so I would entertain a motion if any board members are inclined to make one.
I move that the planning board grant the following waivers in association with the application for the Consolidated Environmental Impact and Design Review, EIDR, and special permit for reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces and a change of use at 384 Washington Street as described in the application thereof, submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on November 20th, 2023. Number one, waiver from strict compliance with section 7.3.7.1.6 requiring a stormwater management report. 2, waiver from strict compliance with section 7.3.7.2 requiring photometric plan for exterior lighting. 3, waiver from strict compliance with section 7.3.7.3 requiring full traffic study. 4, waiver from strict compliance with section 7.3.7.5 requiring photos. Number 5, waiver from strict compliance with section 7.3.7.7 requiring a presentation model.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on those waivers? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Phil,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Next, I would entertain a motion to grant the EIDR and the special permit.
I move that the planning board grant the Consolidated Environmental Impact and Design Review EIDR and special permit for a reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces, change of use at 384 Washington Street as described in the application, therefore submitted to the planning board and filed in the office of the town clerk on November 20th, 2023, subject to the following conditions. 1, except as modified by the conditions and findings hereof, the project shall comply with the project plans in all respects, and the applicant shall pursue completion of the project with reasonable diligence and continuity. 2, if the project or any condition imposed in this decision requires any other permit, license, or other approval from any board or commission or any agency of the town of Westwood or other regulatory agency of the Commonwealth or the federal government, the applicant shall make an appropriate application for the same and shall obtain all required approvals prior to the start of any work. If any condition of such permit, license, or other approval from any other board, committee, or agency is inconsistent with this decision, the applicant shall make application to the planning board for an amendment of this decision, and the planning board shall consider such application in accordance with the requirements of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9, and all applicable planning board rules and regulations. 3, any proposed alterations, modifications, deletions, or changes to the Consolidated Environmental Impact and Design Review EIDR and special permit for a reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces change of use shall be requested in writing to the town planner and building commissioner prior to implementation. Proposed alterations which are considered de minimis by the building commissioner may be accepted as a note to the file. Proposed alterations which are considered minor by the building commissioner shall require the filing of an application of modification of said approval for review by the planning board at a publicly posted planning board meeting. Proposed alterations which are determined to be major by the building commissioner or by the planning board shall be considered by the planning board as a formal amendment to the approval and will require a new public hearing before the planning board. Could you scroll for me, please? Thank you. 4, there shall be no outside storage or display of merchandise. 5, this special permit and EIDR granting relief of 5 parking spaces and parking as shown on the plan shall only be permitted for 2 uses and is not transferable to a future use or future tenant. 6, employees shall not park in the front spaces of the building. 7, there shall be no more than 7 vehicles on site at any one time. The operations shall be by appointment only. 8, the catch basin shall be cleaned prior to occupancy and cleaned as needed, typically twice per year in the fall and spring. 9, in minor snow events, the lot should be cleared with storage in the rear corners, not to impact parking and vehicle flow. Applicant shall remove snow from the site in major snow events. 10, the applicant must appear before planning board within 1 year to review the special permit and EIDR approval in relation to the parking relief and its viability for both commercial uses of the property. If the parking relief is deemed insufficient, the applicant will have to file for a new special permit and EIDR approval. Could you scroll for me? Thank you. 11, the applicant shall obtain approval by the town planner for any signage not included in this application and shall obtain all required signage permits from the building division prior to installation. 12, a copy of this decision and the project plans shall be kept on the project site at all times during construction. 13, this special permit and EIDR shall lapse if a substantial use thereof or construction thereunder has not begun except for good cause within 2 years following the grant thereof. The planning board may extend such approval for good cause upon the written request of the applicant. In the case of this approval, the term substantial use thereof or construction thereunder shall mean the commencement and substantial continued progress of the approved activity.
The motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing
Uh,
none, I will.
I just one quick
Yes.
point. For the applicant, where it says specifically that an operation shall be by appointment only, are you I just want to make sure as compared to primarily, are you comfortable with that? That's consistent with your expectations?
Just with reference to the walk-ins, and again, it didn't sound like there are potentially any many walk-ins. Sal doesn't have any. So I just want to make sure that the applicant follows this.
I'm
So
referring to 7, if you
Yep.
can see it.
Yep.
Second sentence of 7.
Yep.
By appointment only is what your operations appear to be, but that's being incorporated into this. So I just want to make sure that everybody is clear.
Yes, I can speak for Sal.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're good? Okay.
Yep.
There's nothing we can do about walk-ins.
Right.
Okay. And Ms. D'Angelo, is she still here?
Yes, yeah, like I said, I think we literally only have like 2 clients that are senior citizens, and we can just tell them that if they need to come by for anything to make an appointment.
Okay. No other concerns.
Thank you, Phil.
Ellen, I had
Yes.
a question on
Sure.
number 10. It says must appear before the planning board within 1 year. Do we want to make that more of a date of review, or, I mean, technically a week from now is within a year. So I'm just calling that out as something to discuss. Do we want something more definitive? On October 1st, for example, the town will review or something. I don't know. Elijah, I don't know.
We say
How we typically
12 months hereafter or something like that, Elijah?
Yeah, say 12 months after that would work.
As compared to within 1 year.
Yeah.
Through you, Chairperson.
Yes.
That won't be a public hearing. That will just be will be similar to a review, what we're doing this evening. Just won't be a public hearing.
It would be a public meeting in the case that the planning board were to consider that it needed to, you would need to apply for a special permit, then it would have to go through the hearing process again.
No, I understand that, but just as far as this condition, I want to make sure the client understands what they need to do. Hopefully, there's no application fees, or it's not going to be a formal.
So basically, this would mean that by December of next year, the applicant would need to reach out to the board, or to myself or the town pretty much planning division, say that they would like to appear before the board. We can include them on it as an agenda item for a public meeting to then review this the parking.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? Any other questions?
Well, that's fine. So will that just be the first year? Just within the first year. So they need to get in front of this board, meet with the planning department, and then get in front of the board as an agenda item within a year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Ideally, prior to, you would need to do it before, the second planning board meeting in December of 2024.
Okay, thank you.
I think the intent is to let this parking situation play out and see if it's adequate.
Sure.
And it's not an annual review. It's a one-time.
Right. Okay.
12 months hereafter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions, further discussion on the conditions or any other part of this motion? Seeing none, Elijah, do I need to have Kate amend the motion just to read that condition as edited?
Yes, so if you could reread condition number 10 as edited.
Sure. Edited condition 10, the applicant must appear before the planning board in 12 months hereafter to review the special permit and EIDR approval in relation to the parking relief and its viability for both commercial uses at the property. If the parking relief is deemed insufficient, the applicant will have to file for a new special permit and EIDR approval.
Thank you. I have an amended motion. I need a second for the amended motion? Yes?
Yes.
Yes, I need a second.
Second.
I have an amended motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Chris,
Aye.
Kate,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. The motion carries and the permit is granted. Now I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move that the planning board close the Consolidated Environmental Impact and Design Review EIDR and special permit for a reduction of required minimum number of parking spaces change of use public hearing to add an office use with reduced parking at 384 Washington Street.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Kate,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah, have a good evening.
Good luck.
Have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you. You too. Okay, our next agenda item is continuation. Oh, yes?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Alex, can you make me a co-host so I can promote people?
Sorry, Amanda. I had already switched screens. I didn't see you.
It's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Next on our agenda is a continuation of the public hearing for consideration of a limited environmental impact and design review, EIDR, to construct an addition to a private school building with parking alterations at 1054 High Street, continued from December 5th, 2023. Do we have representatives from the applicant here?
Yes.
Give it a moment to bring them in.
Good evening. This is Mary Beth Claus Tobin from Tobin School Westwood.
Hi, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, folks. This is Tom Neal. Sorry, it cut out right as you were transitioning from you guys to us. So good evening. My name is Tom Neal. I'm an architect helping on behalf of Mary Beth and her school. She's the property owner. Our team is back, as you just mentioned, for basically a second round of review. We provided updated documentation since our last visit in October. Some of the updates include an updated landscape plan, an updated site plan, and an updated drainage report. And all of those things kind of tackle various comments from both October, but also from a third-party review from the folks at Beta over the past, basically since October until this past week. So I can go ahead and share if you like. Those are kind of the very high level updates, but sure we can kind of walk through and go through some of your comments.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the updated site plan. Some of the updates include, let's see here, dimensions on the parking spaces, calling out the designation for handicap parking. The spots were allocated last time. This is now just making it much more clear, and their connection to some of the walkways to access the building. Let's see, the drive aisle and the kind of one-way access is called out and designated, as well as some of the signage shown here in plan, but you can also see some of the sign designations. Drainage and let's see, like the water mitigation strategy is also called out both in plan and some of these axonometrics. Really detailing kind of how the water on site will be dealt with. And there's a whole separate drainage report that was also submitted. I believe it was last week that this was submitted.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Was there more you would like to share?
No, sorry. That's really ultimately it. I guess one thing I could flip to quickly is, sorry, I don't have it pulled up. The landscape plan was really the only other. Here it is. Pull it up quick. So this plan, essentially, it needs a little bit of updating to match exactly with the other site plan. But for all intents and purposes, it's essentially the same. But calling out the plant species over here in the table, and then locating those kind of around, basically shielding the parking from the various streets and from the neighbors as well on this adjacency on the left side. That is it from my side.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought I saw Phil here, Phil Paradis, our peer reviewer. If Phil is still here, I would love to hear from him.
Yes, so Phil Paradis with Beta Group. We've been asked to look at this project. There are so we provided a review in October, and subsequently the applicant as he presented has provided some additional information. There are several items that are still outstanding, more administrative in nature. There are a few items that are I wanted to call to the board's attention. I wasn't clear as to where the handicap ramp was. If you look at my report on E5, the ramp looks like it's been relocated to the opposite side of the building than from where it is right now. It's also starting at a foot lower elevation, so I'm not sure how that ramp works and meeting ADA requirement. There's a lot of information that needs to be added. It's not, critical. A lot of the parking is pushed more toward the street and toward the property lines, so they are increasing the amount of non-conformance there. There's a five foot setback from sideline, a 25-foot setback from the front line. So those are left up to the board to decide on those. The landscape plan, as discussed, needs to be updated to show the the change in the landscape area on the east side of the project, as well as the landscape refers to a rain garden in the off Lakeview Ave there. Yeah, so I think and the handicap space actually needs to be van accessible, so that landing needs to be 8 foot wide as opposed to 5 foot wide. And I think the biggest impact is going to be on the east abutter. I don't know if you look at my report, there's a picture at the bottom that shows a view right up the property line. That shows that the house is I want to say probably like 15 feet from that handicap space, and you're moving the pavement about 7 feet closer to that house, and it looks like the grading is going to be such that it would shed more water onto that property. So I think that needs to be addressed. So those are my comments, amongst other administrative things that should be included in the follow-up submission.
Thank you. Before I open up to board comments, I have one question. You mentioned that this proposal would increase nonconformity, an existing nonconformity. Did I hear that correctly? Phil, sorry.
Yes, so there's a parking, you're not supposed to have parking within 25 feet of the street layout on both High Street and on High Street, there's parking shown if you look at the existing conditions within 25 feet. This is so that would be you're moving it closer and you're putting whatever those 3 spaces in front plus so that would be increasing the nonconformance on the east side or the left side where the handicap space is. That's moving from approximately 10 feet to 3 feet. So I think the setback is 5 feet. On the I don't know if Lakeshore Drive would be considered a front yard as well, but the parking is close to 5 feet and certainly within 25 feet of Lakeshore Drive.
Okay, thank you. The reason I'm asking is I know some nonconformities or expansion of existing nonconformities also have to go to the zoning board. Does parking nonconformity, does that not go to the zoning board or?
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just due to the fact that this came in as a limited EIDR, also that it's an educational use, there were some terms in terms of setbacks that don't apply to the educational use.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Good to have that clarified. Thank you. Okay, I will now open it up to my colleagues. I have some other questions and comments, but I would like to let my colleagues speak first. If anyone has questions or comments. Chris.
Thanks. I'm just curious, can you toggle back from the landscape plan back to this parking plan? Having a hard time understanding how you fit the landscaping on the left side by the handicap as it's depicted there, and then showing how the spots are on the previous page that you were just showing.
Yeah, so that's where the new kind of overlay needs to happen. So this was previously shown at approximately, call it 8.5 feet all the way down as a strip. And on the revised plan, in order to satisfy the drive aisle for an emergency vehicle, moving these parking spaces, essentially shifting them to the left, reduce that to approximately 3 feet.
So all that landscape is gone now, or are you gonna change it to something that can be planted in that 3-foot strip or 5-foot strip?
Correct. That's kind of where the landscape catch up needs to happen in terms of an overlay.
Okay. And so as I understand it, the ramp is on the right side of the building, but the handicap parking spot is on the left side. Am I understanding the plan correctly?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Is there something prohibiting putting the spot over on the right side, the new parking on the right side? Can you go to the parking spots again?
Yeah, so there's really nothing preventing it. I mean, they might be a little hard to
I'm
see
just-
on this plan.
I'm just thinking of the obvious question. Do we make them travel further to get in the, to get into the building?
Sure, understood.
That was a knee-jerk thought I had just looking at it. Why are we doing that? And I'm also a little concerned about how tight this is going to get with the new 3 spots in front, and the spots on the left side. And I think there's a parallel park spot on the right side of the entrance. Is that right?
There
Oh,
was
yeah.
previously,
There is, but that's gone now.
correct.
Okay. I'm just worried if parking is not done properly, do we have pinch points there if people aren't pulling all the way up? Is it a recipe for a problem of exit and egress out that exit area? So, and I understand you moved the spot up. I'm just looking at it, and if you have a very large pickup truck parking in that last spot, and they don't pull all the way forward, or there's a snowbank or something like that that prevents them from pulling all the way up, what might that do to that exit lane?
Sure.
Madam Chair,
Understood.
if I may, to Chris's point, and if the applicant were amenable, perhaps marking that space closest to the exit as a compact vehicle space.
Sure.
That would certainly help. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Kate?
Is it possible, sorry to interrupt, is it possible to give access to, there should be a Joe Porter on the line. He's part of the project team. He actually produced, or at least had oversight of this document, just in case he needs to weigh in on anything that I might not know the exact specifics that he could weigh in on. Just wanted to make sure he has access. I can't see the full screen of Windows, but I just want to make sure he could.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds
Thank
like
you.
it would be very, very helpful. So we'll get him promoted to panelist.
Thank you very much.
Sure, no problem. Kate?
Yeah, thank you. So I share Chris's concern about where the accessible space is versus them actually gaining access into the building. That doesn't feel good to me. But I am curious. We now have 3 spaces in that front, center section, and I don't see anything that highlights to cars that you're going to see pedestrians going from there into the door. So I am, as I said last time, very concerned about little people in a tight space with a lot of vehicles, and that's a concern. I wonder how you envision that.
I guess I would say the first thing that comes to mind would be striping these areas that kind of connect these walkways over, connect these 3 spaces that are kind of on their own, crossing this drive aisle, at least making that more of a designated pathway, in lieu of a true sidewalk, at least having that zone be painted or striped.
And we could also designate that as teacher parking and have I expect the parents to primarily park on the right side.
Yeah, that would be great. As I said, I'm very concerned about little people.
I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
Yes.
Okay. So let me answer a couple of your questions regarding the parking. I envisioned those 3 parking spaces as employee parking because they're the most away from the building spaces. The reason we put the handicap space on the left was for short distance if the person is amiable to get to the building. And it also has an accessible route across the front of the building, just outside the drive aisle or in the drive aisle slightly, to get to the handicap ramp on the other side. The reason we don't have it down the other side is it would be an uphill climb for any handicap accessible person to get to that space, whereas it's a much more gentle handicap slope accessible route from that space on the left to the ramp on the right, and a shorter distance to the stairs if the person is amiable to walk up a set of stairs.
So I appreciate that. I am concerned about someone showing up for the first time at your building who doesn't know it well. And how do they, if they pull into the one accessible space, how can they safely and quickly find their way into the building?
We could put some signage up to accommodate that.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate. Phil?
Like the others, I'm very concerned about the tightness of this. I question the setback though, and Elijah, maybe you can clarify. I know that the Dover Amendment is applicable, but I didn't understand that it meant that we had no ability to give consideration to setback, because we have clearly some tightness here in this. While the Dover Amendment is applicable, I don't think that precludes review. Perhaps someone can clarify for me.
Planning board is entitled to consider bulk and height of structures, setback and parking requirements under the zoning.
So we can consider the setback issue, Nora?
Yes, you can.
Okay. I am pretty skeptical about the tightness and the setback issues. I don't know that it's so tight. I don't know that if I'm comfortable with this. That's one of, in addition to some of the comments that both Kate and Chris said. But to me, that is a concern. I'll defer to the others, but that's to me a significant issue.
Thank you, Phil.
Ellen, I had another,
Sure.
As we've been discussing, the 3 spots in the center, this whole area is going to be paved, correct? Asphalt, I assume?
Yes.
So there appear to be 2 areas on the sides of those 3 spots that could be, someone could misconstrue as a spot. I would like to see at the very least striping indicating no parking there, something to, because I could see someone running late, not wanting to park on the far right side, thinking I park near the exit, it's the only available area. I'll park here, run in, grab my son or daughter, and then leave quickly. So I would love to see some striping there on the sides of those 3 to indicate no parking.
That's no problem.
Thank you, Chris. Josh?
Yeah, I think that was a great point by Chris on the striping there, because people will end up using those as parking. Also sort of questioning some of the logistics with the parking plan. How the current state is we have parking across the front. Has that grown, the landscaping in the front grown out, or are we just taking away those parking spots, limiting the current island here, putting in those parking areas, deleting those spots that are parallel parking in front of the structure? Is that the whole intent? And then we're trying to make it up on the other areas?
Partially, to we've eliminated some of those spaces to allow handicap, emergency vehicle access, and to provide an unforwarded travel aisle, so that if we at worst had any queuing in the as drop off or pickup, the vehicles would not be blocking any vehicles in other than the ones that are parked in the spaces. We didn't want parallel spaces involved in the emergency vehicle aisles.
Yeah, okay. It would have seemed to make more sense, instead of having this configuration, to actually just cut straight through from Lakeshore across onto High all the way that way, so you don't have as many curb cuts and stuff like that.
We didn't want to add another third curb cut. We're trying to limit it to the two that were existing.
To remove the curb cut, the two curb cuts onto High Street and go from Lake to High. But I guess it's a little bit late. It's not something that I guess makes sense now, but and I guess the other question that I have is, Beta provided this report, it looks like just as of yesterday. Have you guys gotten a chance to look at it at all and provide any feedback?
Not on the latest Beta report. We just got that this afternoon.
Okay. Because it feels weird to give any type of determination or move forward with this if there's so many items here that require some discussion, or should require some discussion. Again, I know the Dover Amendment and everything else, but there's a lot of unaddressed items here.
I echo that, Josh.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And for the record, I echo that as well. Kate, yes.
Thank you. So I am curious, and I don't know who can answer this best, whether it's going to be Elijah or someone else. If we made when it's a compact car only spot, can it be shorter?
Yeah, there are smaller dimensions. Yes.
So I am very concerned. Thank you for that. So I am very concerned about eating into the setback so close to someone's home. So my thoughts are a couple. With the accessible spot, if that could be staggered somehow, so that you can still allow for some setback as it goes around the circle. I know you need to make room for emergency vehicles, but some sensitivity to the neighbors and how this will change their experience of living in their home would be appreciated by me in looking at this plan. This looks like a terrific plan for the school. Might not be so great for the people who live in a home right next to it, just because of the setback. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. Nora, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, there is also a requirement that parking areas that contain more than 5 cars be screened from view from adjacent residential properties. So I know you haven't seen a landscape plan to show what would be done on that side of the property, but there would have to be a fence or landscaping. It doesn't look like there's enough room for it to be accomplished with shrubs. So I believe there would have to be a fence installed that would block the view of the cars from the adjacent residential property.
Thank you, Nora. That is also helpful and would be good to see that on a revised plan. Did my colleagues have any other questions or comments before I start with mine?
I guess one more thing, really dumb question, but operationally, it seems like you guys use standard trash barrels. Since you're going to be pretty much doubling in size, is that still going to be a way that you're able to work? And if so, like, where are you going to store that trash, or are you going to have to plan for a dumpster?
There are no plans for a dumpster. We're not doubling in size. We're adding at the most less than a third of the size of the school.
Okay. So standard operating procedure as you're doing it now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. So my first question, given that we are allowed to consider the setbacks, I know that any proposed increase to a nonconformity of a structure does require ZBA review. So I guess that is my question. And it may be a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does a parking lot fall under that definition or no?
It does not, and even if the building was increased, let me just say, it's not a non-conforming use, it's a permitted use as a daycare facility. And the parking issue, the closeness of the parking to the lot line cannot be sent to the zoning board for consideration because you cannot require a special permit under the Dover Amendment. So all the
Gotcha.
review is through limited EIDR. So it's just
Okay.
this board that can review the project, but they do have to either comply with bulk height and setback and parking requirements, or the planning board has to grant a waiver if they don't comply. So that's up to the planning board. You have your discretion there in whether to
Okay.
require compliance or not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Because I do have concerns about, given that it's an existing nonconformity to what the setback in this residential zone would require, the lot size, what the lot would require. I'm always hesitant to creep even closer to the property line. So I have concerns about that. I have other questions and comments as well. Sorry, I have a lot of notes here. Some of my questions are for probably for Phil Paradis, actually. You mentioned you had a concern about the impact of the runoff from that parking lot to that one particular abutter. And I know we all looked at that, the stormwater management plan and the drainage plan. I'm curious, do you feel that that plan adequately addresses that runoff, or were you saying there's a concern that it does not? I wasn't clear.
It will increase. How much isn't clear by the grading, but that corner does slope toward the house.
Okay.
And so I would suggest they do something so that it doesn't become a question in the future.
Understood. Thank you. A question, I guess, for the applicant or whomever drew up this plan. I think I mentioned it last time, and I'm not seeing the table that shows what the requirements for the zone. I believe this is single residency, even though it's an educational use. The dimensional requirements, the setbacks, the amount of impervious surface. Typically on a plan, and actually not even typically, I'm fairly certain, I didn't go back and check the bylaws, but I think it's required that that table be present on the plan. It's a helpful tool for me when I'm evaluating to see whether or not this plan complies or does not. The biggest piece of information that I'm looking for that I don't see, and I'm hoping someone has an answer, what percentage of the property after, if this were to be built as proposed here, what percentage of the property surface would be impervious?
About 40.
40, okay. Do you have calculations for that? I haven't seen the totals on that.
It's in the drainage report.
Okay.
In the hydraulic analysis, it has the impervious and pervious
Total
area.
areas. Okay, and that's yeah, 44,000. Okay, I see that. Can you update the table? Well,
Yeah,
that's
we can
square feet,
we can
sorry,
add
yeah.
a table.
Yeah,
to-
that would be good
Do that.
to the plan. Okay. Phil Paradis, we feel comfortable with all that? Because one of my biggest concerns about this whole project is the runoff, because they are increasing the impervious surface by quite a bit. And I read through the stormwater management report, but I'm not an expert in drainage. So are we comfortable with that level of increase and that the impacts are being managed adequately?
So yeah, no, I think this is from what I understand, the soils here are very high draining, A soils. So anytime you add impervious surface, that's a significant change in the surface type and the restriction to infiltrate. But they've provided a fairly significant infiltration system. I would like to see them tie the roof runoff to it as well, just so that we can have the treatment of runoff for phosphorus. That's very mandatory now with MS4 requirements. But I think the system should be adequate. We do, however, require soil tests to confirm the soil texture and the seasonal high groundwater. So that would be necessary to really to confirm this would be adequate.
Okay, thank you. As a couple of my colleagues have said, I do feel like there are some decently significant outstanding items that the applicant hasn't had a chance to respond to. So I'm wary of that. The only other feedback I have for the applicant is just on some of the plant species. I did review your list. I'm very pleased with the rain garden, the proposal. I think that's a wonderful way to manage the runoff, particularly that close, to the road and the wetlands. I think that's wonderful. I just, a couple of your species, proposed species, are not native. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Do you want to address that? Could you, okay, go ahead and share that. Thank you.
Sure. The pin oak is not a native oak. A red oak or a white swamp oak would be, for me, a better choice. But definitely not a pin oak, because we want all Massachusetts native. The leatherleaf viburnum is actually native to Asia, so that's a definite no. The viburnum acerifolium, which is a maple leaf viburnum, if you want to stick in that family, would be a nice choice, or something else that you choose. I'm just throwing out suggestions of alternatives if that's helpful, but you can choose what you like, but those species are not native. And I think those are the only two that I had. You did a very good job picking mostly native species and quite appropriate ones for where you're placing them. So yeah, if you could just find alternatives for those two, I personally would be quite happy. And that was all that I had for my comments and questions. Thank you. Were there any other staff comments?
I think you might want to be aware, I don't know if the rain garden is still part of the project or not, but.
That's a good question then. Is the rain garden still part of the project?
Yes.
If it's needed.
If it's needed, yes, of course it is.
Okay. I would personally lobby for it because I think it's a really attractive way to manage runoff. And I think, is that, refresh my memory, is that the area that is currently gravel where people park? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know we had talked about, it was going to be grass. And I think we had suggested doing something not only a little bit more environmentally friendly, but that would actually help with your stormwater management. So I personally would advocate for it, but
that's not an issue at all. We're happy to do that.
great. Good. Thank you. Any other staff members with questions or comments? Seeing anyone. It does sound like, if I was hearing my colleagues correctly, there was some concern about the number and type of unanswered questions and or outstanding items. So I feel like it might be appropriate for the board to address that before we look at entertaining any motions.
I think from my perspective, there's still a number of issues and I feel uncomfortable with anything other than a continuance. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with the continuance. I think it's appropriate here.
Thank you. I for the record, I agree with that as well. Josh?
Yeah, I said the same as much earlier, so.
Right. Yes, you were one of my colleagues that I was referring to. Kate, do you have any thoughts on that or, okay. I agree with that. I think some of these are a little more than administrative and I would feel more comfortable seeing, like, I agree with our peer reviewer that there should be some linkage, additional work on the drainage system. And I'm not comfortable not seeing that before I make a determination. And there are other things like that. So I also would be comfortable with the continuance. So if, I guess we would have to find a date to continue that to.
The next available dates are January 9th and January 30th.
How are our agendas looking for those dates?
Right now, there is a public hearing on January 9th, as well as a public meeting. So 2 agenda items.
Okay. For the applicant, is that adequate time? I know we have holidays and all kinds of things coming up. Is that adequate time? I know you haven't really had a chance to look at the peer review comments yet, but do you feel like it would potentially be adequate time for you to address the outstanding items?
I think we'll probably have to get back to you on that, but I think
I think the January 30th is a better meeting to give us time to prepare a rebuttal to the peer review and give him time to confirm or deny or rebut any of our comments.
Okay, that sounds, Elijah, does that work from our perspective? Okay.
Yes.
I think that sounds like a plan forward. So I would entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the January 30th, sorry, 29th, 30th, sorry, which?
30th.
2024 planning board meeting.
Via Zoom.
Via Zoom.
So moved.
Thank you, Chris.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for continuance. Any further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. Before I move to continue, that we talked a lot. This is a public hearing, so I will open it to public comment. If there is anyone who would like to comment, please either raise your hand and we will promote you to panelist, or you may enter something in the Q&A. Just include your full name and address. I'll give that a moment. Okay, seeing no public comment, we have a motion for continuance and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Josh?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Thank you all. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, bear with me a minute. I've got a bunch of windows open. Next on our agenda is bylaw amendments, a discussion of potential warrant articles for the May 2024 annual town meeting. Elijah, are we going to start with some other items, or were we going to hear a presentation about wireless first? Which way did you want to do this?
Perhaps we can start with the wireless first. I think that would be the shorter of the discussions. That's okay with the board.
I would concur that will probably be the shorter of the discussions. So I'm good with that if my colleagues are. All right. So if we have folks from Verizon here and we'd like to bring them in. I see a hand up.
Hi, good evening. I'm also joined by my colleague, Ellen Fryman, among others.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, sorry, I couldn't.
No worries.
Hi, there's several more of us.
I think Amanda's bringing them over. Someone, I think it's Amanda, is bringing them over.
Aiden.
See Aiden.
Oscar. Keith.
Great. That's
I think
everyone
we're all here.
essentially.
We're all here now.
Great. All right, then, welcome back, and the
Thank you.
floor is yours. Thank you.
Ellen Fryman, and my address is 1441 Main Street in Springfield, and I represent Verizon Wireless, and here with my colleague Stephen Sobey. Aiden Griffin is the site acquisition consultant with Verizon, and Oscar is our engineer on the project, and Keith Valente is here talking about the radio frequency needs of the coverage needs for the site. When we were last here, we came originally because this is preliminary to going to town meeting to ask for a zone change to allow for wireless coverage, the installation of antennas and monopoles in the University Station area, which is currently precluded. So when we were here last as a preliminary step to the town meeting to ask for your endorsement of the zone change, a number of questions came up about the project itself, our specific plans, because it was felt that by endorsing the zone change, you were arguably supporting the project itself. You know, whether or not anyway, those questions came up. So you wanted to know about the project and what we were intending to do. So unfortunately, it took a little bit of time because when we were here originally, we did not have as many details to share, which we have now worked on and completed, and now have you know, what we could even, you know, what we're really not ready to submit for a special permit application at this point. We won't go into all the details, but we'll just give you an overview of what we're planning to do. Currently, maybe Stephen, you could just show the map that shows where Verizon Wireless is located currently in the town of Westwood.
Yep.
And the site that we're looking at is 85 University Avenue. Again, it's an area that is carved out of the overlay where you can, or you know, the zoning regulations where you can allow cell service to be installed. This is an area that is growing and developing, and I would say it's important to have good coverage in this area, given what the plans are for further development. So here you see the little blue markers are where we're currently located, and then you see that one is the one that we're proposing, and it's a rooftop installation. And it would provide, as Keith will share with you, you know, the coverage that is now you know, lacking in that area. What we're proposing, maybe Oscar, you can just share the rooftop plan and show what we're looking at doing there and the stealthing that we would provide.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yeah, if you could, and then just a quick overview of the layout on the rooftop, and then what it's going to, and then we also have photo sims that will show you what you know, simulating what you would see or not see based on the stealthing that we would provide.
Wait me 1 second. Good evening, board members. Just want to verify you guys can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, I can hear you and see the screen.
Awesome. Good evening. My name is Oscar Suarez. I work for Dewberry Engineers. My address is 45 Irving Street in Winchester. As Ellen mentioned, Verizon is proposing to install cell site at this location at 85 University Ave in Westwood. Verizon is proposing to install equipment on the roof at this address, and also supporting equipment for the same antennas on the roof located on the south west side of the building. Verizon Wireless is proposing to install these antennas inside 2 fiberglass enclosures located on this corner of the building. If I could zoom in for a second. These 2 enclosures are basically 9.5 by 3.5 and 10 feet tall to the top of the enclosure. They will be supported by basically 2 ballast frames, 2 steel frames, which are 14 by 12 ballast frames. They're right about here is one of them. This will be beta sector, and the other one will be on this side, alpha sector. They'll be similar in nature, and to support these antennas, there will be 4 antennas per sector. There will be 2 RHs, which support the LTE antennas that are located on the far right side as you're looking from the back of the enclosure. And then there will be a junction box. These small ballast mounts are 5 by 6, and they basically support these antennas inside the enclosure themselves. The antennas will be set back from the roof edge, 10 feet on this side, and then 10 feet on this side, and then here are the setbacks for from the roof edge to the steel frames. In addition to this equipment on the top floor of the building themselves, the supporting equipment will be 2 refrigerator-looking cabinets. They will be located basically on the. I'm sorry if I go back and forth on the plans, but so you can see an overall of that installation. So here are the antennas, and then the equipment that I'm going to show you next is going to be located on the 5th level of the parking garage that is located on the side of the building, on the west side of the actual building. And here they are. So as I say, there will be 2 refrigerator-looking cabinets. One of them will be the equipment cabinet, and then the other one will be the battery cabinet. Along with those 2 supporting cabinets, you will see a power panel and what we call it a taco box. And there will be a fence that will enclose this equipment that will be about 8 feet tall. And then on the far side, back side of the parking garage, there will be a 35 kilowatt generator that will support this installation in case of a power outage. There will be also a fence. And this fence will be 8 feet 3 inches by 14 feet, and same thing would be 8 foot tall. And then so that you can see the elevation view, here it is. The top of the enclosure, as I mentioned before, would be 10 feet tall. And then so that you can see an isometric view of the proposed enclosure with radio equipment on the back. Here it is. Here's the 12 by 14 ballast frame. The enclosure will be 4-sided, and the tent, to minimize the impact of the aesthetic on the building, we will match the existing facade that is currently on site right now. And that's pretty much it for now.
Maybe we could just put up a couple of the photo sims and show what the elevation views look like.
Would you like me to share that too, or?
I have that available if you want.
Yes, please. Okay, go ahead. Stop sharing.
Okay, and so we have that painted gray to match the paint on the building. Yeah, so it's a before and then after each shot. Okay. Right, and Keith, if you could just talk a little bit about what these antennas will do as far as providing service to this area. You're on mute.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So bear with me, share my screen. So first, just to introduce myself, it's Keith Valenti with C Squared Systems. Business address is 65 Dartmouth Drive in Auburn, New Hampshire. We prepared the RF report that I believe was filed that discusses the need for the proposed site and how it fits within Verizon's network. The report's dated February 16th, 2023. And within the report at the end, there's a set of 5 maps, and those are generally most useful to kind of go through and give a quick rundown of what the state of Verizon's network is in this area and how the proposed site fits within it and the need for the proposed site. So what I'm showing here is it's attachment A from that report. And what we see is it's in red, you have 128 and then the branch off to 95 on the center of the map down south. The brown dash lines are the town borders. So the majority of the map consists of Westwood with Norwood to the southwest and Canton to the south, and then a portion of Milton in the upper right. Shown on the map by the sets of 3 pie-shaped wedges, those are the locations of Verizon sites. The ones in black denote their existing facilities. Those are presently on air. And then in the center of the map is a site labeled Westwood University Station, which is the proposed facility that we're discussing tonight. So on this first map, we have these coverage areas shown in green and yellow. What that represents is Verizon's 4G coverage for this area. We're showing 2 frequency bands of coverage. Verizon operates and deploys their LTE network across multiple frequency bands to sustain the capacity that these networks need to support. So the green area is their 700 megahertz frequency band. That's generally the base layer. It provides the broadest range of coverage due to propagation characteristics. And then in yellow is a higher band coverage called the 2100 megahertz band. Again, it also serves the LTE service, but due to the nature of the physics of that particular frequency band, it doesn't propagate quite as far. So what you have here is sort of a best and worst case coverage scenario from those 2 frequency bands. And what you see in the center of the map around the proposed facility, it's a dense area, and that's really what's driving the need for this facility. Verizon is constantly striving to keep up with the network demand, and in order to do so, they need to densify their network by integrating more and more sites into the area to serve the need. So while I'm sure many of you folks, if you drive through here, you may have okay service from time to time, but when the real issue here for Verizon is when the capacity demand builds up, that's when the service suffers. So the purpose of the proposed site is to both improve coverage, which in turn will add to the capacity of the network. So what you can see is around the proposed facility, particularly into the University Station area, the train station and all the shopping and businesses along University Ave, is there's some level of that lower 700 megahertz coverage, but the capacity isn't quite there due to the limited range from that higher band, the 2100 megahertz shown in yellow. So if we go to the attachment B, this shows the added service, added coverage from the proposed facility. You can see it kind of fills in the northern end of the new developed area as well as the train station. And that's the improvement from a coverage standpoint. The next 2 maps help show how the site helps balance capacity. What we've done here is shown, we're color coding particular sectors from these surrounding sites that are serving the area around this proposed facility. So for example, in red, you have the western facing sector of this Canton 5 facility, which is on the Point 32 building. To the south, at the southern end of the park, that's on the John Hancock building. Verizon has a rooftop facility there. The eastern facing sector is shown in purple, and then so on. You have an orange sector from a site off the map. So in particular, this western facing sector of Canton 5 it's covering all the traffic along 128. It's covering into the train station in the northern half of that newly developed area. So what the proposed site does is it helps offload by absorbing that area and coverage. So in green, this is what the proposed site would serve. What that allows to happen is now you have a new facility in the area that can take on the traffic in that green area, and it creates sort of a domino improvement effect in the sense that the demand on the surrounding sectors are relaxed and they can do a better job serving the need closer to those sites. The last map, this is a topography map of the area. This is helpful oftentimes to describe why those coverage areas look the way they do. The coverage areas are predominantly defined by the topography and the land cover of the area. So you can see the darker blue areas; those are your lower lying areas. The sites outside of that are blocked by these hilltops and struggle to provide a good deal of coverage into this area. So that helps explain why there might be some pockets or gaps in coverage in this area. And that's a quick rundown of the maps in the report, and hopefully that was helpful to understand why Verizon is here at this facility and what the benefit of it is to their network.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Keith. So just to summarize again, this request that we have before you is to endorse the zone change just to allow us to come back and whatever approvals are needed to seek those approvals, because we're precluded from doing that now until the zoning allows us to seek approvals and install any antennas in this area of town. So again, this is an approval of this project, and we're a ways from that until we have a spring town meeting and hopefully get your approval, your endorsement, and then hopefully get town meeting approval and then come back. So again, this is several months away, but this is the preliminary step that we need to go forward with to take the next step. So we're available for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation and for making sure you clarified quite eloquently for anyone paying attention that we're not actually evaluating your project. What we just saw is for our reference. And I believe the board spoke about doing a more comprehensive wireless zoning article. So it wouldn't just necessarily be for that one project anyway. We were looking at doing something a bit more impactful.
This would allow anyone within that area to come forth with whatever approval process is adopted. Correct.
So thank you. That was helpful. It was good for me to see that. I will open up the floor to any questions or comments from board members. I see Josh has his hand up, so we'll start with you.
Thank you for that clarification around we're not looking to approve this, and it's for the more holistic question of the zoning around it. One thing I might bring up, I'm actually pretty comfortable with RF towers and exposure limits and all that, but from experience in town, not everyone is. So it's going to be a bit of a point of contention with surrounding neighbors. So I think whatever we can do to require some sort of education to people who might be impacted with this would be really quite important, because it's going to be a not my backyard type of prospect. Although there's plenty of benefits, people will knee-jerk have concerns. So I think it's incumbent on us to figure out how to best meet them where they are, and whether that's certain reports that we're requiring to be provided as part of these approvals, or anything else in terms of nearby homes, cross-sectionals. You guys were able to lay that all out, and just being able to show that and demonstrate it in more lay terms, I think would be really quite helpful. The other thing I think, keep in mind, especially with this project, generators, I would be going towards natural gas generators, just as a heads up. In this one, for instance, you're in a water resource protection overlay district. I doubt you could even get a diesel in there. And battery backups are becoming of acute concern with a lot of fire departments. So lithium ion batteries and stuff like that. So keep that in mind in terms of signage and sizing and everything else. But I'm for it. I think it's good for the town. It's good for everybody, but just put some guardrails on it and work with some education for outreach.
Thank you. Having done this now several decades, we of course are prepared and have addressed these questions wherever we go. So thank you for those comments, and yeah, we are prepared to address those questions, concerns.
Yeah, great. Just as an observation, I know, like Ellen, we've even talked about the towers that got removed from the school facilities, and it comes up. So having a better way to approach it might be useful, so that we don't have a lot of public outcry around it.
Thank you. Were there any other board member questions for the team here from Verizon? Okay. Elijah, or any other staff comments or questions?
I guess I just wanted to share some of the points that were discussed at the last meeting as it relates to potential parameters for a wireless communication system if it were to be expanded. So this is just an overview, and this was shared with the Verizon team just to give them an idea as to what we'd be considering going into the town meeting warrant season.
Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to, that I think we were, even though the request was really about one specific location, the Gables within University Station, I think the board had kind of, and staff had discussed maybe taking a little bit of a broader approach rather than just one property. Because I think the need is there. That's what I'm hearing, is there is need there, both in the private sector and also our public safety folks. I know this wouldn't directly address that, but perhaps if we have a few more poles, they could add some equipment to it at some point, which would be beneficial overall. So Elijah, how do we proceed as a board? Obviously, we're not evaluating a project, but do we move into discussion about the idea of this warrant article, or is this kind of all we need to do at this point on this particular subject?
I think that's all that we need to do at this particular time. We do have the hearing coming up January 9th, unless Nora may have some more to add to this. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I can share my screen and show you the draft that we've advertised for zoning articles. And I can show you the current draft language as of today, which is waiting for further input from the board at this meeting before it moved forward for the public hearing. But let me show you what I have for just the draft produced by staff. Let's see. It's not allowing me. There we go. Can you see that?
I see that it, not yet. It's trying.
Okay.
There it is.
Yep.
Okay. So let me just back this up a bit. I have a draft of all the proposed articles. So let me get to the top of this first one. All right, this would be your Article 2.
Nora, could you zoom in just a little bit? I'm straining my eyes.
Or let me see. How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
Better. Thank you.
Extremely slow. I think the power outages must have affected how our computers are operating here. So let me see if I can move this along. All right, so the article is written to allow for the board to consider wireless communication overlay district changes. Some of those changes would be at University Station and some of them may be elsewhere in town. The changes at University Station would be changes to the zoning bylaw itself to allow wireless communication within the University Avenue mixed-use district. The changes to the rest of the bylaw would not actually be changes in the bylaw itself. They would be changes to the map to designate other areas in Westwood eligible for wireless communication that are not currently eligible. And the planning board still has to discuss where those additional areas might be. So the first section of this bylaw would revise section 9.7.4.1.2 of the zoning bylaw. That's within the University Avenue mixed use district. And it's a section entitled Uses Allowed Anywhere on the Master Development Plan. And it would add a subsection G that says rooftop wireless communication facility approved pursuant to section 9.7.11.19 would be one of those uses that are allowed anywhere on the master development plan. So that would be on any rooftop within University Avenue, whether it's a commercial building, a residential building, the memory care facility, the hotel. It could go on any rooftop if the board grants project development review approval. And then there would be another section changed, section 9.7.4.2.4, and that's under the special permit uses that are permitted. And that would allow a monopole wireless communication facility approved pursuant to 9.7.11.19. That's a new section of the zoning bylaw. And then here's my proposal for what section 9.7.19 would do. It would be separated into, it would allow wireless communication facilities in two parts. The first would be rooftop wireless communication facilities. And it would say it was allowed by project development review approval pursuant to section 9.7.12.2.2, which is just the section of the UAMUD bylaw that sets forth the rules for project development review. And then it would have certain restrictions. The first is that no component of the facility can be taller than 10 feet, nor extend more than 10 feet above the existing surface of the roof on which it's proposed for installation. The second restriction would be that all components of a rooftop wireless communication facility shall be set back a minimum of 10 feet from the interior parapet surrounding the roof on which the facility is proposed for installation. If there is no parapet, then the board would have to make a judgment call there, or would require the addition of a parapet. The next restriction would be if any portion of the proposed rooftop wireless communication facility is visible from any point on an adjacent property, then all antennas, cables, and associated equipment shall be fully contained within a stealth enclosure of a size, shape, and color designed to blend into the surrounding environment in a manner acceptable to the board. So if you can say we're talking about the Gables property and you can see it while standing either in the Gateway Park or across the street at the train station, if it's not set so far back in the building that it can't be seen, or it can't be seen, say, from the 4th floor of the hotel, if it's invisible, it could just be an antenna. If it's visible from any of those places, it has to be within a stealth canister. So stealth canister, similar to what we have on the public storage building on the East Street Rotary. If you can picture the wireless communication facilities there are all within stealth canisters that are painted to match the color of the building. That would be allowed. But what we have at 690 Canton Street, where antennas are just on the roof of the building and fully visible, that would not be allowed. So the standards are just a little bit higher in University Station. Another restriction, the subsequent replacement of antennas and or equipment associated with an approved rooftop wireless communication facility where said antennas and or equipment are fully within an existing stealth enclosure and do not alter the size or appearance of the stealth structure may be permitted by administrative project development review approval by the town planner. So when you're swapping out antennas down the line, you don't have to come back to the planning board for further review as long as you're staying within that existing stealth container. That would make it a lot easier to get, to keep the facilities up to date. And then any generator associated with a rooftop wireless communication facility shall be enclosed by sound attenuation panels sufficient to reduce the sound associated with operation of said generator to a level acceptable to the planning board. And that level of sound would probably differ depending on where it's located. So if you're on top of an apartment building or on top of a hotel or the memory care facility, or even the Brigham and Women's Office building, you probably want the sound attenuation to be greater than you might want it, say, I can't even think of another example. Maybe on the roof of Lifetime Fitness or something that is a building that has more noise on the inside, you might not notice the sound of a generator. Then there are separate requirements for monopoles. So a monopole wireless communication facility may be permitted by special permit pursuant to section, little typo there, pursuant to section 10.3 with the following restrictions. First, all monopole wireless communication facilities within the UAMUD shall employ flagpole style monopoles with a maximum stealth canister diameter of no larger than 36 inches and a maximum height of 120 feet above the existing grade on which the facility is proposed for installation. That 120 feet is the highest size of a monopole anywhere in town currently. So the board might want to think about that, whether that's an acceptable height. Some places at University Station, you might even be able to go higher than that. You allow 7-foot tall buildings down in the area by the train station. Other areas up by Gables, you have a much lesser height requirement. The next restriction would be all equipment, including cabinetry, cabling, generators, and ice bridges associated with a monopole wireless communication facility shall be fully contained within a screened enclosure, which shall not exceed 10 feet in height above existing grade on which the facility is proposed for installation. No portion of said equipment shall be visible above said screened enclosure. Next, I have a provision that all monopole wireless communication facilities within the UAMUD shall be landscaped in a manner consistent with the quality and quantity of landscape materials throughout the University Station development in a manner acceptable to the board. The shape, size, and color of each component of a monopole wireless communication facility shall be designed to blend into the surrounding environment in a manner acceptable to the board. The subsequent replacement of antennas and/or equipment associated with an approved monopole wireless communication facility where said antennas and/or equipment are fully within an existing stealth enclosure and do not alter the size or appearance of said stealth structure may be permitted by administrative project development review approval by the town planner. So same as for the rooftop. Next provision is that there can be no more than 2 monopole wireless communication facilities approved for construction within the UAMUD. So a maximum of 2 anywhere within the district. And finally, any generator associated with a monopole wireless communication facility shall be enclosed by sound attenuation panels sufficient to reduce the sound associated with operation of said generator to a level acceptable to the planning board. Now I think Josh had commented on fuel for generators. There's nothing in here that I have written to address that. So if you want to add that as a restriction, that would be the type of change that you would take up at your public hearing, and any other changes that you'd like to see. But this is just the draft language to get you started discussing what you want to see.
Thank you, Nora. So I will open it up to board members. I know that's a whole lot, but if anyone has any thoughts or comments on what we've just seen and heard. Chris.
Thanks, Ellen. Nora, wouldn't the Citizens Bank building see the entire roof of the Gables and make that provision almost useless?
I would say, yeah. So I would say if it's visible from anywhere, you would, including from Citizens Bank, you would need to put it in a stealth enclosure.
Okay.
Thank you. Josh?
Yeah, I think I'd be inclined to see some sort of language in here about notification to abutters on a more technical basis as well, like defining what type of exposure, some sort of notification for them, and just as an educational material whenever there are changes or new installs. I know there was something. So
Just to get at two things, one, notification to abutters comes under the rules of the special permit. So that would be in that section. Under project development review, there is no notice to abutters. So the way the University Station section is developed, project development review is noticed only by your agenda item. There is no advertisement and there is no notice to abutters. So if you want to have even rooftop units have notice to abutters, then that would require them to be allowed only by special permit, which would be different than you do elsewhere in town where you allow EIDR approval. Our project development review at University Station is very similar to EIDR approval throughout the rest of the town, with the exception that there is no notice that goes out to abutters. It's just an advertised public meeting. It's not done in the course of a public hearing. So that's one point I wanted to make. And I think I've forgotten what your second point was. I'm sorry.
No, it was really just around notifications for new installs or modifications. More so, not just like something is happening, but like the what is happening. Because I imagine the butters are just going to say, oh, there's a new install occurring, and it's not going to tell them anything. And then they're going to potentially spin up with anxiety around it and have an uproar where it may not be warranted. It's just because of lack of understanding or knowledge around it. So it's trying to stymie that.
So then too, what's required for an application, that would all come in your rules and regulations. So you would we would copy over the rules and regulations that you have for wireless communication facilities elsewhere in town, and we would add those to the rules and regulations for the University Avenue mixed use district, so that you'd still need the same thing. You need the health report, the frequency report, the demonstration of need, all of the standard required plans, equipment, specifications, elevations, landscaping, signage, all of that you required. Any wireless facility would be required for these wireless facilities. And that would be not in the zoning bylaw, but in your rules and regulations for handling the applications that are filed.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, just Nora, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I am curious, where is the 120-foot pole in town?
I believe that is near 120 Louderbrook, just off the highway, off of Route 109 as you're going on to Route 128. There's a monopole. It's not a flag style monopole. It's a pole that has antennas attached to it.
Gotcha. Sorry. Gotcha.
That's 120 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Just following up on Josh's point on notice, is whether the notice provision makes it more palatable and sellable, I guess, was the issue. I think Josh had a good point on that.
And so if you would like that, you would have to then approve, you would have to consider any wireless by special permit and not by project development review, because we would not be able to alter project development review in this section of the bylaw. That's how University Station was designed to. So for instance, the hotel or the memory care facility or Lifetime Fitness, those were all approved by project development review, which did not require notice to abutters. So rather than change how the bylaw works, what you'd want to do, if you think notice is necessary for a wireless facility, then you'd want to make even your rooftop facilities be approved by special permit, because a special permit requires notice.
Okay. That sounds a little onerous. Okay.
Thank you, Phil. Any other comments or questions from board members? Let's see if there's any hands up. I'm not seeing any hands up. I would also just like to say thank you for getting all this ready. It's quite a bit, but I think it's a, a really excellent, I don't want to say start because there's a lot of work here, but to head into the public hearing process. I think I would also support the idea of putting some language in there about, generator requirements. I think that's a good idea. But it sounded like we can do that as part of the public hearing process.
Yes, so this is just a first draft. When we advertise for the public hearing, we need to have a draft for anyone who's interested to read what we're thinking to start with. It can evolve as long as it stays within the scope of the original newspaper advertisement. It can evolve substantially in the course of your public hearing. So this is just kind of a first stated draft of what direction the board was thinking of going, and it can change from here until you get to the second FinCom meeting where you have to have final language.
Great. I think this is an excellent first draft and is, pretty far along. But it sounds like we have plenty of room to add, subtract, whatever, as we incorporate public comment and that kind of thing. Great. I have nothing further on this. So this is not a public hearing. Do we take public comment at this point, or do we wait for the public hearings to open?
That's up to you, because this is a draft that the board members haven't seen yet. It might be better to just wait until the public hearing. So this is just kind of, the draft that we had to get ready for anyone who's looking for it.
Okay.
So I would think it might make more sense for the board members to get a look at this, review it before your next meeting. Your next meeting on January 9th is your public hearing, and then take comments at that time. So I wasn't expecting board members to go into any of the meat of this yet, just to get an idea of where we stand to get started. You have 7 potential articles that have been advertised, and I think the only one you probably want to discuss substantively now in advance of the public hearing is the Mumford expansion. The others are still in pretty early stages.
Agreed. I think that's all reasonable, and I will forgo public comment at this point, since I everything you said makes perfect sense to me. So that is terrific. Thank you. So with that, I think the next article we should take a peek at is we should start talking about the expansion of the Mumford zoning at this point. I think that's going to take some time.
Okay, so
We can let the Verizon folks go, probably.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Phil. Thank you all for coming
you.
this evening. Your presentation was very helpful.
Okay, so then the what I have here is a draft article that has all of the parcels that might be added to it left out. So this again is just a kind of a skeleton article. So I would propose that you revise the current Mumford section of the bylaw, which is section 9.9. First, revise the location, section 9.9.2, to adopt more than one Mumford zone. So in this draft, I show 3 separate Mumford zones. You may want 2, you may want 5 or 6. So that'll be determined as you choose the parcels that you have, that you're interested in putting forward. But the way I've written this draft so far, there would be 3 separate Mumford districts. Mumford 1, I'm calling the medium density Mumford overlay district. Mumford 2, the high density Mumford overlay district, and Mumford 3, the medium density ground floor commercial Mumford overlay district. So I see those when we talked about at your last meeting, a couple of different options. Medium density Mumford zone is what we already have. So that's the 2 properties at University Station and the Everett Street property, where we allow by right mixed use or multifamily housing at 15 units per acre. Mumford 2 here that I'm proposing is a high density. Maybe you may want to consider taking some of the properties that are already developed to a greater density than 15 units per acre, specifically Gables and the Pulte condo complex, and put those in a separate district that allows up to 35 units per acre. Wouldn't be any different than what's already there. But that would be a way to capture more units, compliance for more units with that type of zone. And then the third one I have here that I've structured the skeleton bylaw, I'm calling medium density ground floor commercial, and that may be something you impose where you want to make sure commercial uses remain intact, for instance, along Washington Street, along High Street. If you're interested in having a zone along Providence Highway, somewhere where you want to make sure you don't lose commercial, but you want the ability to add residential above commercial. So I've structured that with 3 zones. You could have as many zones as you want, and we would revise the bylaw accordingly. Under the section 9.9.3 granting authority, that's only in there because I found 2 typos in it. I had a wrong section number and the word of instead of or. So we can take this as an opportunity to correct those typos. And then the section on permitted uses, under the example I've given here, where you have medium density and high density, I revised the permitted use section to say that Mumford EIDR approvals and Mumford special permits shall be granted for the uses specified below. And then I separated the uses so that the Mumford Mumford 1 and 2, which were the medium density and the high density, have all the uses that are already permitted in the district you have now. But then what I'm calling Mumford 3, which would require ground floor, would only allow upper story multifamily residential dwelling units. It would not allow first story, but then would allow all the other uses as well. So a slight change that ends up being very wordy, but it just creates a zone where you can keep commercial on the first floor. And as a reminder, we discussed this last time, a zone where you keep commercial on the first floor, you can count the number of units that could be produced under that zone to our minimum unit capacity, but you cannot count the acreage in that zone to our minimum size requirement for an MBTA zone. Then I'm proposing that we change section 9.9.6, the residential density allowances. This is if you wanted to go with a medium density and then a high density, you would have to revise this section so that the medium density allowed 15 units per acre, the high density allowed 35 units per acre, or something else that you might think is appropriate. So again, this is just a starting point. And then it follows through this section and just makes those changes. So where we go from a overall 15 units per acre throughout the existing Mumford, this builds in options for a 15 unit per acre zone and a 35 unit per acre zone. Then there's a section on the fiscal analysis. If you remember, the fiscal analysis is only required for a special permit within the Mumford zone. So that stays the same. It used to say all Mumford special permit applications requesting a residential density greater than 15 units per acre requires a fiscal analysis. I've just changed that to greater than 15 units per acre in Mumford 1 or Mumford 3, or greater than 35 units per acre in Mumford 2. And then special permit decisions, same thing, just made that change. Instead of just 15 units per acre, I split it into 2 parts where some are 15, some are 35. And then the last section of this article is the most important, the one that I think you need to spend some time on tonight, and that's deciding what properties fall within this. So this is for zoning map amendments. So I've set it up again for 3 potential zones, Mumford 1, 2, and 3. And I put the 2 Everett Street parcels into a Mumford 1 medium density zone. I put the 2 University Station parcels, or 3 University Station parcels, into a Mumford 2 high density zone, leaving room for lots of other parcels to be considered for either of those. And then I didn't fill any parcels, but I would recommend you consider a Mumford 3 medium density ground floor commercial zone, certainly on Washington Street, perhaps on High Street, maybe on Providence Highway, and maybe even on some other portion of University Avenue outside of University Station. So that's the extent of the article. Has a lot of blanks in it, and a lot of room for you to play with it and decide what it is you want. I think you should start your discussion though on on your thoughts of where you think Mumford might go, what specific parcels you think are appropriate, and whether or not you want to do a medium density, high density, whether or not you want to do strictly residential and then ground floor commercial residential. So I think those are the 3 areas you should focus on tonight.
Thank you, Nora. Okay. That is really helpful. The framework is helpful to frame the conversation. I know there's a whole list of parcels to go over. So I guess I'll just open up the floor to any thoughts board members have, if everybody's had a chance to kind of look at the parcel lists and the different approaches of how we could go about this. I'm interested in what direction people would like to take. Chris.
Just to clarify, we're at 16 currently within the half mile of the train station, right? And we need half of our 50, so 9 more acres within to meet the requirement of the law, right?
We need a minimum of 25 acres within a half acre of a train station.
Half mile.
And another 25 acres somewhere else in town.
Right, and they could all be 50 within a half mile, but at least 25
Absolutely.
have to be. Okay.
Right.
All right, just
And
wanted to.
For parking flexibility, you probably do want to keep as much as possible close to train stations
Okay, thanks.
or bus.
And Nora, for the high density, the high density is not subject to the acreage restriction.
It is.
It
That's-
is,
so-
it is subject to the acreage restriction.
High density you could count that as part of your acreage.
That's
As long as you're
what I was,
allowing, yes, as long as you're allowing residential use by right on all floors, it can be part of your maximum or minimum 50 acre.
so it would have to be all floors. There's no carve out or anything like that. So you have to do essentially the entire high density
You have to
building
allow
parcel.
that. Right, you would have to allow that. But
Okay.
that's what you have. So what you have at Gables and Pulte right now,
Right.
full structure is residential. Ground floor to rooftop is all residential. It's all at a minimum 35. I think Pulte is 35 units per acre. I think, don't have it in front of me right now, but Gables is over 50 units per acre.
So I guess playing devil's advocate, what would be the cons to the high density? I mean, to me, it seems like a logical choice, but I have been trying to struggle to see anything against it as compared to for the high density at Gables and the other parcel.
So the only thing I could say is that it could be redeveloped by right to a size almost as big as what it is now. It's very unlikely that it would be redeveloped. And in addition, it would have to be pulled out of the University Station development. And the planning board would have to specifically allow that for a change. So I don't think there would be any change. So I think you would be simply capturing the units that exist today. Now, I don't think that's all you'd want to do. I think you need to do more than that, but that might be a way to get to account for units that already exist.
But you took the words out of my mouth, where we also would have, because it would have to be pulled from the University Station district, and that would give us, I guess, I don't want to say flexibility, but it gives us, it struck me as that was a little bit of a win-win-win, where you get high density, you get an existing with not a high likelihood of something that's going to be pulled out of University Station. Am I wrong about that, or?
No, I think you're right. And it also, if those units weren't already there, that's a great place for them because of the proximity to the train station, but also
Exactly.
the grocery store and other things, park areas that are nearby. So that's why multifamily residential was developed there in the first place. So it's an appropriate
Exactly.
place for it.
Mhm.
And this just captures credit for the units that exist,
Okay.
but does not help you actually build new units. So
Yep.
it wouldn't be okay on its own, but as part of the entire 50 acres, it's acceptable.
Mhm. Okay.
And just to make sure I understand, as far as what counts for what, anything that's by right fully residential counts both towards capacity and potentially towards acreage. Anything that is first floor commercial with residential above, regardless of where it is in town, would only count towards capacity, correct? Because it includes the
Correct.
commercial. Okay.
Correct.
And the capacity we are being asked to allow for is not just a straight, because I've gotten this question, is not just a straight 15 units per acre times 50 acres. It's based
not.
on the number of total housing units we currently have. It's a percentage of that, right?
Right, and the
Okay.
number we've been given is 870 units of multifamily housing. So that takes more than 50 acres to produce that.
That's the question I've been
15
getting
units
is,
per acre.
right,
It
exactly.
doesn't
That's
take
the
more.
question that,
You could do it within 50 acres if you had a high density district.
okay. Yes, because someone asked me that, like, why is it 850 when if we just do 50 acres at 50 and it's 750 or, something like that. And that was the explanation I give. And I just wanted to make sure I had it correct, but that there's two formulas now, unlike when they first rolled out the legislation where there was one formula that was a bit more arbitrary. They've changed the criteria.
Right,
The-
it's very, very specific. Every town has been given different numbers, and it's all
Okay.
based on not only the number of housing units you have, but the amount of what the EOHLC considers available land for development around your train stations. So if
Okay.
you happen to have a lot of state-owned land or town-owned land that was around your train stations, there's less area available for development, and your unit count ends up being lower. But Westwood has plenty of open developable land, so our unit count is 870 units.
This is
Thank
going to be an
you.
education challenge because even reviewing it, and it takes a little bit to sort through it. And for the average person, I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge to make others understand.
The guidelines
Right.
are somewhat convoluted, but there are FAQs that are put out, and they're a little bit more clear. I think we'll need to publish those to make sure that they're available to everyone so that they can understand the intent of the bylaw, the intent of the guidelines, and how the state would apply them.
Agreed. And also, what the state considers developable doesn't mean that it's currently undeveloped. So that's part of because I get that too. Like people are saying, well, everything's already got stuff on it, which is, it's true. It doesn't mean it's stuff that wouldn't benefit from redevelopment like 22 Everett Street. But I understand the disconnect because we're not looking at, acres of open land or,
Yes.
so I think that is something that is, something that we as a board should keep in mind, the education aspect of this about all these ins and outs. And I'm sorry,
So the
Amanda,
state-
you've had your hand up for a while.
It's okay. I just wanted to, when the discussion of if there's any cons to doing a high density district, I'm not opposed to a high density district, but I will point out it won't necessarily generate more housing, so it won't address the, what the law is intended to do, which is to create more housing.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Nora, you had started to say
Yeah.
something.
I was just going to say, so the state's definition of developable land, what they really mean is available for development or redevelopment, so not otherwise restricted. So what you can't count is land that's owned by the state or a town that's not already slated for development, land that's owned by a school, that's a park protected under Article 97, land that's a river or a lake or, otherwise not available for development or redevelopment.
In churches?
Thank you.
Churches, yeah, same thing. Churches, schools, those are not allowable for inclusion in the zone. Or
Nora,
they can be within your zone, but they can't count towards the 50 acres.
Okay.
Do we have any protected parks from 97? It was Morrison was proposed for that at one point, right?
It was proposed. I think it's debatable whether it's already protected or not.
Yeah, I couldn't remember how that played out, but when you just said that, it triggered.
There's I think the June Street playground and the conservation area around that, I think, is protected. The new cemetery and the land around that is protected. We have more conservation areas that are Article 97 than we have active parks. I don't know if the School Street playground is Article 97 or not. I don't think it is. I think that was a former school property. Article 97 usually comes from when town dollars were used to purchase land for use as recreation or conservation land.
I can share a quick, just from the Mass Mapper. It shows some of the Article 97 spaces.
Thank you. Yeah, the question of Morrison has come up in other conversations that I've been part of as well, because I think either the open space and recreation plan or the comp plan listed as Article 97, but I don't know that there was ever confirmation that that was correct. I'm wondering if it's on this.
Yes, it is shown there as Article 97. So, so whoever created this map thinks it is.
Right, and it may not be accurate.
Yeah, I thought it was very onerous on the town and restrictive, and we decided not to do it. That was about 5 years ago, I think.
So there was a petition article to put Morrison Park into Article
Right.
97, and there was some debate whether that was a necessary article or whether it was already covered by Article 97. The petition article never made it, I think it was recommended for indefinite postponement, and that discussion was never completed. You know what it was actually? That was one of the articles in the COVID year when all of the only financial articles were allowed to be taken up at that 2020 town meeting, and the article was never taken up and never reproposed.
How do you remember all that stuff? That's just scary.
Nor is the verbal history of the town.
I remember his Norapedia. I don't know how you remember all that stuff. I had this vague recollection, and you just threw out a whole Encyclopedia Britannica.
I think we should have a separate page on the town website and just entitle it Norapedia.
I mean that in the most positive way, by the way. Nothing disparaging about it. I'm impressed. All right. Sorry to sidetrack the discussion there.
No, it's a good question because, you know, if we're, not that I personally would want to, if something's protected under Article 97, there's probably a reason for it. And I wouldn't necessarily want to offer that up for redevelopment in general, but it's good for our conversation. If we're looking at parcels, if there's a parcel that is under Article 97 that may not be an obvious thing, then that's good for us to know, because if it's not going to count, I don't necessarily want to put it on the block, you know?
Right.
Sure. Yep.
One of the first things we'll do when this board comes up with its list of parcels that it thinks it would like to include an article, before we actually take that article to town meeting, we will review it with EOHLC, where they will look at the properties and tell us whether or not they consider them eligible for inclusion. Because what we don't want to do is waste our time going to town meeting and ending up with parcels that end up being rejected.
Would they turn around a response quickly enough for us to be able to do it?
They will. They will.
They
It's
will.
an informal process. It's not like the Attorney General approval of the article after it's passed. It's an informal review where they map what we propose as a district and let us know if they have any parcels that they don't think would be eligible. So I can give you an example. Lexington, where Abby McCabe went as their planner when she left here, they adopted at their last town meeting, they adopted over 200 acres where they were only required to have 50. They still haven't gotten through. They went back then to the state to present their acres for approval after their town meeting. They still haven't made it through their approval, and that was last spring. So they haven't gotten their state approval. So the recommended route is to go first, take it to the state first, discuss it with them, and then bring it to town meeting.
And I'll add, they've been responsive. Like Elijah and I met with them to ask a question related to the 22 Everett Street project and how it affected the MBTA zoning, and they met with us within days. So they're responsive to that.
And they have a mapping tool that was created just for that purpose.
Okay, that's good. Any other thoughts from my colleagues or questions about what we need to do and, you know, what's kind of been presented as options? I'll say I like the approach of where it makes sense to zone a higher density, because to your point, if there are already things that are built to a higher density that we know it works without a negative impact, I don't see any reason to not get the credit, as it were, for what's already been created. And also, you know, I've heard off and on in the past that Gables had always wanted to add some more apartments. They wanted to expand. This would allow them to do that without necessarily having to go through as much of a process as they would otherwise. So I don't think that's a bad thing in and of itself. So I personally would be in favor of looking at the higher density zones where it makes sense to do so. I mean, honestly, even 22 Everett, we approved the extra units. That is a higher, now it's inherently a higher density than 15 units per acre. So it might be interesting to do that math and see. It might be more than a couple of zones, I guess, is what I'm thinking. I don't want to make it too convoluted and onerous, but if we're allowing higher density already and things are being built or are already built, I don't see why we wouldn't want to incorporate that into what we're doing.
You also might want to say that I think Everett Street is about 22 units per acre, something along
22,
those
23.
lines. Okay, so you might decide that that is an appropriate density even for your medium density zone. Maybe you don't want to stick with 15. That way you get to use up less land and see the number of, to reach the housing capacity using less land. So that's an option as well.
So if we went high density, and an expansion proposal came in, as Ellen was just saying, would the increased density above the threshold still make it as of right, or it is no longer of right?
Not, because so the Gables property, say it's at 54 units per acre or something
Right.
along those lines. And if you had a zone that allowed 35 units per acre and they wanted to go beyond what they already were, they have to do that by special permits. That's not by right. The only
Okay.
way that you would be able to do that by right and capture additional units there would be, say you set it at 60 units per acre for the Gables property and adopted a zone just around the Gables property. Then you get that more. But I don't know that I'd recommend doing that. I think that it's one thing to say, we know how this works, this fits here, and let's just set the density with what we have.
That could be a little bit too using what we already have without trying to create new housing, essentially.
Right,
Is
so that would only be one part of a larger plan. If that's
Right.
all you were doing, it wouldn't work. But if
It wouldn't.
that's part of what you're doing, and then you're also zoning other areas that you hope to see redeveloped, just like Everett Street, and that was zoned as part of the initial Mumford zone with the intention of seeing a redevelopment, and now we have it. It's been approved, and it's moving quickly toward construction. So that's creating real housing units, which is not what the law requires you to do, but clearly what the spirit of the law intended.
I'm
Thank
going to
you.
echo Ellen on the high density. I think it seems that struck me as a good path to get some credits towards working towards the rest of the solution.
Yeah, for me, it's a balance between creating opportunities that make sense for our community, but also doing what the state is telling us we have to do. So because I don't know that, you know, high density in every area of town, I don't think that's good, you know, in all the areas that we could put the high density, I don't think that's going to work. But I do think in areas where we see it already working without negative impacts, like I said, where it makes sense, I should say where it makes sense to me, like University Station, where we're seeing the Pulte condos are a higher density, it's working.
Right.
Gables is a higher density, it's working.
Right.
Josh, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, you sort of stole my thunder. Like, there's a couple of
Sorry.
different. right? Like, I would like to use this as an opportunity to develop some land that has gone historically neglected and make it more enticing potentially. I'd like to increase availability of housing in town, but I also don't like this being shoved down our throats in a fashion that feels unfair. Because I don't think we have quite we're already dealing with infrastructure issues with schools and, the firehouse and everything else as well. Like, so we need to balance this as much as possible. So I also think when we're looking at parcels, we should think about like current traffic flows, picking those parcels, what are the school districts that already exist. I mean, I know that stuff can be changed, but it also sort of makes sense to be positioning in that way. Obviously being in proximity to mass transit is important as well for at least, what is it, half? So
25 acres.
Yeah. So just using those all as decision markers, I just think is important. And again, to be completely honest, I will be looking for some parcels that I don't see as being developed, because I don't want to be forced into taking a specific acreage, but I also want to take credit for some of the higher densities. Like, let's make it work where it might work, it should work, it makes sense to work, but not just, oh, we have to do it, we're gonna put it someplace in town and then eat it later for whatever negative outcomes come. So
I'm gonna echo Josh on the traffic issues, which obviously was a big issue in the Everett Street project, especially like when you consider some of the traffic issues on 109 and some of the areas. If you created as of right some whether it's medium or high or whatever, it could be a real challenge dealing with some of the traffic issues that could be going along with that. And I think we do need to be sensitive with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm a little hesitant to put a lot of by right housing, especially in Islington Center. I like the idea of ground floor commercial and second level, but I both, 109, although 109 would really benefit from redevelopment, and that might sweeten the pot a little bit because FMUOD hasn't seemed to entice the folks who own those parcels to do much. But particularly Islington Center, I know there are parcels that would really benefit from redevelopment, but given the traffic challenges and some of the conversations we've just had about Everett Street, the ongoing conversations about the intersections at where Clappertree ends and becomes Everett and Washington, and then East Street and Washington, I'm a little hesitant to allow higher housing by right there without as much of the control that a board would have if it's by special permit, the way that it currently is possible. So that I'm sensitive to that as well.
Yeah. I just I'm concerned about High Street. High Street just, especially like on Wednesday when everybody is going in person, because I'm near the high school and it is a parking lot past Dunkin' Donuts. It can be a real challenge.
then it clears up, right?
Yeah.
Further up.
Yeah.
So, and there's plenty of area up there as well. And I think the same thing with Islington, although we are also forced into being in proximity to the train stations, right? Like, you can only do so much. I think to your point, Ellen, like if we look closer to Providence Highway potentially, or further down, again towards that 95, or even on the other side of 95, what area lies over there, those parcels. I know those are some commercial areas. I don't know. I think there's opportunity, but nothing's going to be perfect. People are always going to be a little bit perturbed by what we're doing. So
I think you also want to look at housing where people want to live.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that it's not just walkable to trains, but walkable to stores and to parks and to schools. And there are some areas in town that might have less of an impact on traffic because of the locations, but might not be the most livable areas.
That's a good point. Although I appreciate that. And when I say appreciate, I don't necessarily mean in terms of like, thank you. I mean, in terms of, I understand why the state has now said, well, only half of your area has to be within a half mile of the train station. But I guess my concern there is anything, if we're trying to minimize traffic impacts, both for all of us, but also to encourage transit-friendly housing, and we want people to use public transportation, and part of that is making it easier. Anything that's outside of that half-mile radius, I think we're really going to have to really rely on those transportation demand management plans, the way that 22 Everett came up with a really excellent one. But I'm just, again, we won't know how well that works until we see it.
Most of the traffic that feeds into that tied up commute is pass-through traffic coming from other towns. It's a single housing project with 15 units per acre really is not going to add very much to the traffic at all.
Just, I can't remember, and I know you outlined all this, but like the Good Plaza, what is the acreage there, just for context?
Is that the Lambert's Plaza? Is that
No, I'm sorry, it's the Toast Office.
Toast Office? Okay,
Does anyone have the spreadsheet open already?
I did.
Not, I will try to. My computer's extremely slow tonight.
Do you know the address?
1.37 acres. Good Plaza.
Mhm.
So it's like an acre and a third, so that,
Yeah.
so that
Yes.
would end up, if that was Doan's 15 units per acre over first floor commercial, it could end up being a little bit bigger than the Colburn School
Mhm.
on that plot.
It would probably be twice as big. Coburn School is only 6 units.
Oh,
over 2
okay,
floors.
okay.
Yeah,
Over
but
2
it's on
floors.
but that's a much smaller lot. So the Colburn School is about almost 13 units per acre, 12 and a half maybe. So just for 15 units per acre, the Colburn School might be 7 units instead of 6.
Okay.
And so the Good Plaza, I don't know, would that be about 20? Probably about 20 units there.
And we would keep the first floor commercial if we decide.
Right, so I think if you are considering either the downtown districts or anywhere where we have active commercial, I would strongly suggest you keep ground floor commercial because we really can't afford to lose commercial value.
I
And it
agree with
also,
that.
it's also important for livability of the area. You want to have commercial within walking distance.
How's the tax rate applied? Just out of curiosity, if you have a high density or some kind of density above it?
So for example, the steeple building, that's condominiumized and the commercial uses on the first floor are taxed for commercial tax rate and the second and third floor is taxed for residential. So the assessor splits up the value of each unit within the building. And I imagine they do the same thing for the Colburn School, which is also was apartments originally, is now condos upstairs and lease commercial space on the first floor.
And by right residential doesn't stipulate that they have to be rentals. Someone could choose to build condos,
Right.
which would,
Our zoning cannot determine ownership, it can only determine the use. So residential is a use, whether it's condo, co-op, apartment, it's all residential.
any other thoughts on the idea of 3 zones? I personally like the idea of low, medium, and high. I think that gives us some
Yeah,
flexibility and makes sense.
I thought that was a good suggestion that Chris had. Might work.
Sorry, how does that play in though with the first floor commercial? Where would we put that? Still in the medium? Or are we talking about a fourth?
The first floor commercial's separate though, right? That would be a different
It'd be a different zone, but you still have to establish an acreage,
density.
a density requirement for that zone as well.
You'd
So
have
that-
4 different.
Yeah, maybe that's 20. You know, if you just said your low was 15, your medium was 25, your high was 35, then maybe you have the one with the commercial on the first floor and 20 units per acre above. I
So
guess,
do
I
we-
guess it all depends on how many units you need to account for.
Right.
So should we start like rubber hitting the road in terms of like looking at parcels during this meeting? Should we reach out to you individually as a group? Like, how does that start to look? And actually, one other dumb question about prohibitions. How about the area associated with private golf clubs potentially?
So if they're not restricted, if they're not reserved as conservation area, they're eligible. Any land that could be sold by the current owner to a new owner who wants to develop it, or the current owner has the right to and the ability to develop it, it's not restricted, that's fair game.
Like, it would be a pretty hard thing for a country club that straddled the Westwood Dedham line to organize something like that, just saying in terms of pure acreage.
I would suggest that we try to come up with come tonight to an agreement on the zones. If we go low, medium, high, medium, something, we try to come to a consensus on that and maybe get some individual looking at how we can go, because I think if we go parcel by parcel, we're going to have a long night tonight, and then playing with our calculators to see if we're getting our numbers correct. I think we need the structure and then try to fill in the details.
So I would agree with that. I think what might be helpful is set that structure tonight, and then if each of you could make your own zones up, what you think would work, and then send them to me, to Elijah, to Amanda, and we will then produce options A, B, C, D, and E, and present those to you at your public hearing, and then you can discuss them each in its entirety, and then maybe what you end up with is taking a little from one, a little from the other, and composing a district that makes sense to the full board.
And just wanted to mention, we are at the 3-hour.
Thank you.
Tried to avoid Elijah saying the 5-hour mark.
Yeah, right. Well, to your point, I think that approach makes sense. You know, we land on the structure and we can fill in the details later. Josh, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, totally. I think we're all on board then with the structure then, right? Like, I keep hearing us say that low, medium, high, and then some sort of permutation.
Yeah,
floor.
and then fill it in.
Yeah.
Try to see how we can fill it in.
And I'm also hearing us say that we'd all, at least I heard Kate and yourself, I believe, say that there's interest, and I actually agree, some development in an area, particularly around Mid-High Street, where we have some aged infrastructure. Again, conceptually being very light and thoughtful, if any, we talk about anything around Islington, was another theme I heard us talking about, right? Taking advantage of densification that already exists, another theme, right? So it's the structure, but also that structure too, like what our inputs are, and then we go, each one of us will do our own little thing. Nora's and Elijah have already done their thing. So thank you again. Those lists are great. And we move on. So how do we need any formal, like, hey, this is what we're doing, or is it like good enough to be like, we're good?
To advertise.
Yeah.
Well, we advertised as of January 9th, right?
Yeah, so we've already, so the ad we put in the paper just says expand the Mumford zone and revise the wireless communication. It's just the titles. It's really just brief information. And then the draft that I just went through, where I just showed you 2 of the articles in the draft, that has a little bit more meat in it. That's what will be deposited at the town clerk's office and available here. And Amanda will add it to the meeting packet for the hearing on the 9th, so people can take a look at that. What I can do is I can further revise that draft to add low, medium, high, any other things that you want me to stick in there now, and then revise it further right before the meeting on the 9th with whatever you each send to us with that, with your options. So for this Article 1, we'd have Article 1 option A, Article 1 option B, and we would have a bunch of different ones, and we can discuss them all on the 9th. And then each of you can support your thoughts for why you would propose it in this, going in one direction. Someone else might want to go in another direction. And then we can hone in and hopefully get to a consensus.
I think that's a good path. I like that idea.
That sounds like it would maximize the effort in minimum time. I have one question. I know I'm back on the TDM because I think that's a really essential tool with any of the multifamily housing on many levels. I think that transportation demand management plans are going to be really important. Was that part of, because it was a special permit, or refresh my memory, is that part of the Mumford bylaw, even for the by right stuff? And if it's not, is that something we could include as part of the by right section of the bylaw?
So I have to look back, but I think it's part of the by right section. I think the only thing that jumps in with a special permit is fiscal review.
Okay.
Everything else, I think, as long as it's a reasonable requirement, it can be requested. So just like, their architectural plans, their traffic analysis, their stormwater analysis, having a transportation demand management.
That certainly would fall within reasonable, it seems.
Right. So I may suggest that, we make that earlier in the process rather than after. I think that worked really well with our review of 22 Everett. And if it's something that we're not necessarily going to get to review as a board, if it's a by right thing and would just go to administration, I think it would just be helpful to have that earlier in the process in general, because I think that that's a really useful tool and can really help alleviate a lot of the concerns that we've all been talking about traffic. And if something's not close to a train station, making it easier for people to utilize public transport. That's another path to that. Great. Okay.
Agreed.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to add, or shall we move on to the next agenda item? Because I think we all understand what we need to do next.
If I can just add, one thing that I would look at on the GIS map is the flood risk for these parcels, especially because there is specific guidance in the guidelines that say you can't put too many restrictions on the permitting process. So even though additional environmental measures would be beneficial, we have to make sure we're not making it difficult to develop.
Gotcha. Good point. Yeah. Since stormwater is a big concern kind of everywhere in town, it's an excellent point. Thank you. Any more input on this topic for this evening? All right. Thank you all. That was a really productive and helpful discussion. I appreciate everybody's time and input. Nora, is there anything else on articles we need to discuss?
So there are other articles. I could just speak to them very briefly. I don't think you really need to look over the language yet. The third article, we talked about Mumford was the first article, wireless was the second article. The third article involves changes to definitions requested by the building commissioner. For instance, there's accessory apartments. They want to refer to gross floor area instead of floor area. There's a new definition on a detached accessory structure. There are diagrams to show how a wall on top of a fence is treated. Another diagram to show how a building height is composed. A correction in the definition for rear yard. So very simple, straightforward, that we got the language exactly from the building commissioner, and I put it right into the draft. I don't think you'll have many concerns about that, so I think that's something you can handle during a hearing. You probably don't need to review it in advance. Article 4, this one also was a request of the building commissioner, and this takes 3 sections of the bylaw that have overlay districts that refer to very specific parcels, and instead of listing the parcels in the bylaw, it takes out the map and lot numbers and instead just says these are located as shown on the official zoning map. And the 3 areas in the zoning bylaw where we're doing this are the adult uses overlay district, the wireless communication overlay district, and let me see what the third one was. This hold on, I just went right past it. The substance rehabilitation facility overlay district. So it doesn't change where they're located. Just instead of saying parcel 17 lot 172, it now says the lots included in this district are as shown on the official zoning map. That way, if someone creates an A&R and divides a parcel into 2 parcels and they get different lot numbers, we don't run into a problem. Or if someone changes the address, they're also listed right now by address. So if 40 Allied Drive asked to change their address to, I don't know, 19 East Street, then that would be a problem in our bylaw. But if it's just noted that the land is shown on the zoning map, then we're good. Then Article 5 is a request. Oh, I already said about this one, to put gross floor area instead of regular floor area into the accessory apartment bylaw. There's another article for general bylaw amendments relative to solid waste. So this one I just, I'll send you the text, but essentially it adds temporary construction dumpsters for commercial and multifamily residential properties into the general bylaw amendments that you proposed and that were approved by town meeting last year. No, not really more complicated than that. So again, that's a pretty straightforward one for you to look at. And then the last one, housekeeping, which to date, we haven't found any errors. So we're still looking, but we'll have a housekeeping article. Maybe it'll be the first year we don't need one, which would be nice.
Excellent.
So I don't think there's anything there to talk about in advance of the hearing. When Amanda will post it to your meeting packet for the January 9th hearing, look it over. Let me know any further changes you want, and I'll update and get a further revised version posted. But most of it you can just discuss on January 9th. I think the Mumford article is the one that really requires your attention.
Agreed. Thank you. And I did see, I got the email notification, the Board of Health is having a meeting about dumpsters coming up, aren't they?
Yes. I just got that too. I think it might be next Tuesday. Does that make sense? No, it wouldn't be the 26th. Maybe it's in January. I'll have to check my email for the date of that hearing. But it is coming up. They're adopting regulations. They've already discussed their regulations, and now they're at the point where they're ready to adopt them.
Will that affect our work at all, or no?
So if you think that they cover everything and that you don't need to amend the general bylaw, you can drop that article, but I have it advertised so that you'll be ready to go forward with it if what the health Board of Health does is not sufficient. So
Gotcha.
I will send, here it is, Board of Health public hearing is on January 3rd.
Okay, so before ours, so we'll know.
Before yours, you'll know what it is, and then on the 9th, you can decide that that's either good enough or it's not, and you want to continue with your article. So we'll have both ready to go.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I will take your recommendation. I don't think there's anything else, unless anyone disagrees, that we need to discuss on the rest of those at this juncture. I'm happy to move on to the next item unless anyone objects. I'm not seeing any objection. So the next agenda item, by the way, thank you for that very detailed description and overview. Next on our agenda is review of draft meeting minutes from December 4th, 2023 and December 5th, 2023. So that first one, December, one of them was our meeting and the other was when we went to FinCom, if I'm not mistaken. So
Well, the 4th was select board meeting.
sorry, yes, I had that backwards. FinCom was after. We went to the select board to reappoint our associate, I always want to say alternate associate member, and then we had our own meeting. So did everyone get a chance to take a look at those? And did anyone have any edits or anything they wanted to note about the minutes?
I had no edits. I thought they looked good.
Excellent. And there were only 3 of us at the select board meeting. So Josh and Kate, I guess we'll need to abstain on the vote on those. Okay, so we should take them individually then. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from December 4th, Monday, December 4th, 2023, as written.
That's the select board, correct?
Yes.
Yes. I so move to accept the draft minutes of December 4th.
Can I second but then abstain?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, don't cause procedural problems there, Kate.
Sorry.
But you know, I appreciate your willingness to help out. So, all right. So I will take a. Sorry, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the December 4th minutes? Seeing none, I will take a roll call vote. Kate,
Abstain.
Josh,
Abstain.
Chris,
Aye.
Phil.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. All right, I will now entertain a motion to accept the minutes from December 5th, 2023 as written.
Kate,
So
you're
moved.
up.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Kate,
Aye.
Phil,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Josh,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Motion carries. Minutes are accepted. Thank you. Next on our agenda is updates from agency and committee representatives. Has anyone attended any meetings that they would like to share with the board?
I haven't attended any meetings, but I guess as it relates to the Climate Action Task Force, I did want to share that we are extending the time for the survey to January 15th. Wanted to leave that open so that we could get some more feedback. If you would like, for anyone who's watching this now or at the recording, you can take a screenshot. You can pick the QR code here. It'll lead you to the actual survey. We have a general survey and we also have a youth survey. And again, I'm extending that time to January 15th so that we can get the public feedback.
Thank you. All right.
Can I say something? Can I have a quick
yes, of
question?
course.
Sorry. Elijah, is that on the planning board Facebook page? Do you use that anymore? Or does somebody, who does the Town of Westwood Facebook page? Is it Westwood Media Center?
That's correct. Yeah.
I just think, I feel like the only place I've seen it really is from you, and I think maybe posting it somewhere. Maybe with all these kids home from college, they'll all do it.
I echo that.
Yes, that's the hope. Westwood Media Center has been sharing it on their Facebook page. I have a placeholder on the town website as well. So I did actually have an ad in the Hometown Weekly. So been trying different areas, but it's
I'm gonna have 2 people fill it out this month before the
Yeah.
15th.
Elijah,
Excellent.
social media campaign.
You need to get it on their Insta. That's their real driver of
Get it
views,
out on
right?
TikTok.
You need some TikToks.
Yes.
Do a little
Push
funny
them.
dance, Elijah. You'll get it. You'll get some engagement.
I might have to pass on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to fill that out too, but I put the sticker on the back of my car and I'm hoping people, when they walk by in local parking lots, hit the QR code. It's probably wishful thinking, but I figured I could at least help advertise a little bit. Anyone
Appreciate it.
else? Yes, sir. No, I think that's great. I can't wait for the next phase of that whole endeavor. Anyone else been to any committee or board meetings that they would like to share? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So next on our agenda are general miscellaneous updates and administrative items. I see upcoming board meeting. We have a meeting on January 9th, 2024. Very hard to read that date out loud. This year went by quickly. The FinCom article sponsors meeting, January 16th, 2024. Special town meeting, January 17th, 2024. Was there anything else under general administrative items that we should talk about?
Just one comment. I know because we had such a big lift with the expansion of the zoning for multifamily. I don't want to lose track of some of the other things that we were looking at for the following town meeting. So I hate to put that on the back burner, but like we have to, because there's so much work associated with this, but like, let's get back to some of those other more holistic bylaws that we were interested in doing before that we had to deprioritize. So for me, like that's the 25 mile an hour through the town adoption. I know we had talked about some other bylaws associated with tree canopy and things like that. We don't have time now, but once we do, let's prioritize looking at those as well.
I agree.
On
There's
that.
been a lot of, actually, surprisingly.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of that.
There's been a lot of appetite from various people in town with a couple of those different bylaws that we had to deprioritize.
Yeah, I've heard the same about a couple of them. So yes, I agree. When we have the bandwidth for that, I think we need to reprioritize some of those. Okay. That is the end of our agenda. I don't see anything else.
Kate, it's your turn.
I was just gonna say, is this the part where I say motion to close?
I'll second it.
Yes. All right, I have a motion to adjourn and I have a second. Is there any further discussion on adjournment? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a roll call. Kate?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Josh?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Happy holidays.
and Happy New
Happy
Year, everyone.
holidays, everyone.
See you next year.
Enjoy. Take
Good
care.
night.
Good
Good
night.
night.